My fiancé Sue looked down on me for coming from a fallen family. He called me crude and unfit to be seen in polite society. He had people carry a chest of books, a basket of needles, thread and embroidery supplies, and a zither into my courtyard. Pointing at them with his chin raised, he said, "The future young mistress of the Sue family cannot be as vulgar as a common market woman. When you have memorized the books, embroidered a bridal gown, and learned to play the zither for my pleasure, then I will marry you into my household." Later, I accepted the 100 taels of silver that Madame Sue sent and happily agreed to end the engagement. I was delighted to marry someone else. The Sue family made the matter of dissolving the engagement extremely public. A capable senior housekeeper at Madame Sue's side came with 2 pretty maidservants and 2 male porters, carrying 2 shoulder poles of gifts, filling the small courtyard of my home. Has the Sue family come to present betrothal gifts? Oh, how wonderful! Lee girl has waited until she is 19. At last the Sue family has sent someone. Ching-ji is finally going to enjoy some good fortune. The Sue family has wealth beyond measure, yet they brought only 2 poles of gifts. Are those maidservants from the Sue household? They look richer and prettier than Lee girl. The moment I saw the 2 gift poles, I knew the Shu family had not come to give betrothal gifts. No betrothal gifts came without a red flower tied to them. The senior housekeeper lifted her chin and looked at everyone from the corner of her eyes. "Miss Lee, our young master has gone south with the master of the house to conduct business. This trip will take at least a year and a half. Madam says that it would be inconvenient to keep delaying your youth, so she sent me to dissolve the engagement." 3 years earlier, I had brought the marriage contract and betrothal token to the Sue family's gate. They said that an elder of the Sue clan's senior branch had died, and that Su Chungyun had to observe 3 years of mourning, so the wedding date had to be postponed. I had asked, would 1 year of mourning not be enough? Madame Sue only lifted her teacup, took a small sip, and neither looked at me nor answered. Su Chungyun sneered. "You cannot even wait 3 years? Are you really that desperate to enter the Sue household?" I looked at his face. It was not as though I could not wait. His words were sharp, but his looks were still passable. At any rate, he was much better than the street bullies. 3 years then, fortunate, it was not his father who had died. Otherwise, if he had to mourn for 5 or 7 years, I truly would not have been able to wait that long at my age. But as soon as the mourning period ended, he wanted to go south with Master Su to do business. In truth, I knew very well that he looked down on me and did not want to marry me. He liked the county magistrate's daughter, a gentle and accomplished young lady from a respectable family. In his eyes, the pastries made by the magistrate's daughter were exquisite and beautiful, tempting even by their scent alone. The pastries I made were dirty and foul, fit only to be handed out to beggars. The scented sachets she embroidered were rare and delicate, while anything I made disgusted him. He would not only throw it to the ground, but stomp on it until it was crushed before he felt satisfied. After postponing our wedding, he had someone move a chest of books, a basket of embroidery supplies, and a zither into my small courtyard. Pointing at them with his chin raised, he said, "The future young mistress of the Su family cannot be as vulgar as a common market woman. I am not making things difficult for you. Memorize the books, play the zither for my pleasure, and embroider this bridal gown. In 3 years, I will marry you into my household." Yet every time I finished memorizing one book from that chest, it was replaced by another. Whenever I finished embroidering part of the bridal gown, someone would pull the stitches apart the next day. No one damaged the zither, but even after I wore the skin from my fingertips, I still could not play a single tune that pleased him. I went to him and wanted to discuss whether I could stop learning the zither and take up something else. Instead, I happened to hear him laughing about me with others behind my back. "That fool has gone mad dreaming of a rich life." The hint was so obvious, yet she still does not understand. She is actually practicing the zither at home. Does she really think she can learn to play it just by burying her head in practice? Does she think it is cotton for stuffing? She is going to make me laugh to death. Someone asked why, if he despised me so much, he did not simply end the engagement. Su Chungyun replied carelessly, "Her father once did my father a favor. She came to my door because of that debt, and it would not be convenient for me to refuse. I am a man. I do not fear having a marriage delayed. Let it sit for now. Watching her be so foolish and earnest is rather amusing. I treat it as entertainment to pass the time." My heart swelled with pain. I was not obsessed with living a wealthy life. When the street bully tried to force me into marriage, I had only brought the marriage contract to the Su household because I wanted a safe place and a proper life. My eyes stung and I wanted to cry, but I held it back and told myself that it was all right. He did not like me, I did not truly like him either. I was not heartbroken since he had used me, I had used him in return. The Shu family was a great household, and marrying him had been a convenient way to keep the bully away. It seemed that he had finally tired of mocking me. That was good. Before I had pretended to be foolish and refused to end the engagement because I had been shameless. But not long ago that bully had been stabbed to death. Now that Su Cheng-yun wanted to dissolve the engagement, he could do so. It was time for me to marry as well. Madam has said that, in those years, your father gave our master a small cake and a dose of medicine. The Shu family is not ungrateful. Today, along with these gifts, we bring 100 taels of silver as repayment to the Li family. The marriage contract had been made because, when my father was traveling to join the army, he happened to save Master Su. Master Su had been robbed of all his belongings, grievously injured, and left in a desolate mountain forest, starving and barely clinging to life. My father gave him a mouthful of water and a cake, then roughly dressed his wounds with the medicine he carried. Master Su had survived. Perhaps he had been too moved in that moment. He wept bitterly, and insisted on repaying the favor, leaving a betrothal token behind and forcibly arranging a marriage between our children. More than 10 years had passed. My father had died, and the Su family was no longer the Su family of old, which had begun with only 2 small shops. Master Su's mind had cooled. It was only natural that he wished to dissolve the engagement. Maid, one of the attendants standing behind the senior housekeeper, stepped forward and handed me a banknote worth 100 taels. I looked at her slender figure and lovely face, then at the hand she held out before me, fair and creamy smooth. Instinctively, I hid my own hands. After my father's death, I had supported myself by pickling vegetables, reeling silk and weaving cloth through work. My hands were not so coarse that they were ugly, but they could never have been as soft as the maidservants'. A faint, fresh fragrance of powder and cosmetics clung to her. No wonder I had always bathed so thoroughly, yet Su Cheng-yun still complained that I smelled of pickled vegetables and would never let me come near him. His disdain for me was not entirely without reason. When I did not take the banknote, the senior housekeeper's eyes sharpened, and contempt filled her expression. Miss Lai, even if we put a generous value on the cake and medicine your father gave our master, they would only be worth 1 tael of silver. The head of the family is now willing to repay it 100-fold. Miss Li should know what is proper and not make a scene that leaves everyone looking bad. Before I could react, Shen from next door, who had come to watch the commotion, exploded. Wonderful. I see it clearly now. You Su family people see that the Li family has only 1 orphaned girl left, so you refuse to honor the engagement, is that it? What are 100 taels? If you have any backbone, tell Master Su to give her father's life back. Aunt Shin was a butcher by trade. She had a fiery temper but an exceptionally warm heart, and she could never bear to see injustice. She squeezed forward, ready to drive them out with her sturdy waist. Go go go, bringing 2 little vixens to someone's door and fouling the place with your filth. Who are you people? How many years of Lai girl's life have you wasted? You say the engagement is over and that makes it over? I hurriedly stopped her. It can be ended. It can be ended. I neatly accepted the 100 taels and tucked them into my sash. I was not someone who treated money as dirt. With this silver I could support a man at home. To keep the house secure, I took the marriage contract and betrothal token and stuffed them into the senior housekeeper's hand. Tell madam not to worry. I will never cling to the Su family, and tell Su Cheng-yun that I will not seek the Su family's wealthy life anymore. Oh, and since you are here, take away that chest of books, the zither and the unfinished bridal gown as well. They take up too much room in my courtyard. The senior housekeeper was still being pushed about by Aunt Shin, and had clearly not expected the matter to turn out this way. She stood stunned for a moment. When she came to herself, she snatched the marriage contract and token, shoved Aunt Shin away and snapped, "Mind your own business." Then she looked at me contemptuously again. Miss Li, remember what you said today. You have left the Su family behind. The neighbors who had gathered at the mouth of the alley gradually dispersed. Aunt Shin looked at me with both anger and pity. Have you pickled vegetables until you became foolish? Such a rich marriage connection. And they drove you off with only 100 taels? I clung to Aunt Shen and would not let go. It is enough, it is enough. 100 taels is enough to support a man. Aunt Shen, help me find a match. Brother Dazwang would not be bad. I can become your daughter-in-law. Aunt Shen waved me away in disgust. Your brother Dazwang became engaged a few days ago. You ended your engagement too late. Find someone yourself, and see what kind of man your 100 taels can support, silly girl. I do not ask for great wealth or rank. He only needs to know warmth and care, and be honest and steady. Someone like Brother Dezwang plain and kind is already very good. What a pity he is engaged. While I was worrying about where to find a man, the next day the threshold of my home was nearly worn smooth by visitors. 100 taels was nothing to a wealthy household, but to a poor scholar or common family, it was an extremely generous dowry. In a single day, several matchmakers came to propose matches for me, each holding several possible families for me to choose from. There were farmers, laborers, bun sellers, dough figurine makers, fortune tellers, carpenters, blacksmiths, and executioners. When matchmakers praised a prospective husband, every one of them seemed peerless in heaven and rare on earth. I listened until my head spun. Every household seemed good. I exchanged the banknote for loose silver and looked at the glittering pile before me. Could I perhaps support 2 more men? I shut the courtyard gate and stayed home counting silver, considering how I might manage to support 2 more men. Before I had worked it out, I heard someone knock on the gate. What a thriving marriage market this was. Another matchmaker must have come. Enough. I had already been dazzled by all the choices. If the man in this matchmaker's hand was not good enough, I would not even consider him. I opened the door and saw a handsome young man outside in a plain scholar's robe. The words in my throat fell straight back into my stomach, and even my tongue tangled. Master Ji. Master Ji's name was Ji Yan Shu. He was a scholar who lived in the alley behind my home. His ancestors had once served as officials, but after the family fell on hard times, they ended up here. He had a refined scholarly air and was clearly brimming with talent. He had already earned the rank of licensed scholar when he moved to the back street. The women from several nearby streets had once stolen glances at him. 9 out of 10 had fallen for him, but the neighborhood aunties said that he was desperately poor, that his home had nothing but 4 bare walls. More than half the people who had wanted to make a marriage connection with him had backed away. Marrying into such a family meant putting up one's own property to support it. What small household could dare gamble on his future? Not long ago, he had taken the autumn provincial examination, and had now become a provincial graduate. Many people regretted letting him go, but it was already beyond their reach to climb high enough to marry into his family. Everyone said Master Ji had the talent to become the top scholar. They had heard that the county magistrate wanted to take him as a son-in-law, but he had refused, of course. A man like him should eventually be matched with the daughter of a great official. If he truly became the top scholar, he could even become the emperor's son-in-law. Yet he had come to knock on my door. Ji Yan Shu stood outside in a plain scholar's robe, elegant and simple. When he saw me open the door, he cupped his hands in a small salute. "Forgive me, Miss Lai, my swallow kite accidentally fell into your courtyard." "Oh, you came for your kite?" My face grew hot. I turned and searched the courtyard for where the kite had fallen. The swallow kite was caught in the plum tree. The tree was bare, with no leaves to hide it. One puff of wind would make it fall to the ground. Scholars truly were interesting. The scenery was bare, the weather was so cold, and he was still flying a kite. I picked it up and gave it to him. He accepted it with a smile and thanked me, but he did not leave. Even the rims of his ears were a little red. I looked at him in confusion. Then I looked again and became dazed. Master Ji was truly handsome. All the matches the matchmakers had mentioned suddenly seemed unsuitable. I would have to tell them to keep looking. The man had to be handsome, literate, and pleasant to speak with. Why had Master Ji still not left? He hesitated and stammered. His ears grew redder. Even the fingers holding the kite turned red. I wondered for a moment, then suddenly understood. Everyone had hard times. Times when they had to ask relatives or neighbors for help. It truly was embarrassing to open one's mouth in such circumstances. I hesitated, stuck my head out of the door, and saw that no one else was there. Then I quickly fished out 1 tael of loose silver and pressed it into his hand. "Master Ji, I understand. Take it and use it. You do not need to hurry to repay me." Master Ji held the silver and his expression became difficult to describe. He looked a little stunned, a little blank, as though this was not what he had expected. Seeing his expression, I guessed it might not be enough. After hesitating, I took out another 3 taels and placed them in his hand. "Take it and use it. Just remember to pay me back." Master Ji's expression changed at once. A faint gleam danced in his eyes as he looked at me with a smile that was not quite a smile. Under his gaze, my face burned. Panicked and pained at the thought of my money, I took out 1 more tael and stuffed it into his hand, then closed his large fingers around it. "No more. This is my dowry money. I cannot spare even 1 tael. And you must write me a note of debt so that I can be at ease." Ji Yan Shu burst out laughing, his shoulders trembling. "Why are you so certain that I came to borrow silver?" He stopped laughing. but his eyes were still full of amusement. That gaze was both gentle and ardent, making me so unsettled that I only wanted to shut the door and run away, he said. I heard that you ended your engagement. I came to learn how you felt and to ask for your hand. I truly shut the door and ran away. Heavens, a poor scholar who might one day become the top scholar had come to cheat me out of my dowry money. The neighborhood aunties had said that his home was so poor it had only 4 walls left. He must lack money to travel to the capital for the examinations. 5 or 10 taels would surely not be enough, so he had fixed his eyes on my dowry. Once I supported him through the capital examinations, and he became the top scholar, I would become the wife he cast aside after sharing his hard years. I could not fall for it. I was so flustered that I did not dare leave the house for the rest of the day. I slept fitfully and did not feel any better until morning. But when I opened the door the next day, I immediately saw the swallow kite hanging from the plum tree in my courtyard. It dangled foolishly from a branch. Whenever the wind passed, its tail swayed lightly. That tail seemed to brush over my heart, leaving it tangled and restless. I had to make things clear with him. I went inside to fetch something, took down the kite, slipped out the back door, and went to his home. I knocked 3 times and the door opened. Master Ji stood inside. He did not look surprised, yet the gentle, faint light that had been in his eyes the day before was gone. Something in my heart dropped. I quickly raised the kite to hide my feelings. Your kite fell into my courtyard again? He asked. Are you only returning the kite? Not only that. I stuffed a pouch of silver into his arms. For some reason, I did not dare look up at him. There are 45 taels here. Added to the 5 taels from yesterday, that makes 50 taels. I am lending them to you for your journey to the capital examinations. Do not let your kite fall into my courtyard again. When I said that, a wave of bitterness rose in my heart. I turned to run, but he caught my wrist and pulled me into his house. Explain what you mean. Panic seized me. I was afraid someone might see us and misunderstand. He simply shut the door, stood before me, and asked, You do not want my kite to fall into your courtyard anymore. Does that mean you have taken a liking to someone else? My heart pounded, but my mouth was stubborn. Yes. I have taken a liking to someone else. You have taken a liking to someone else, yet you are lending me so much silver for my examinations. Does that person know? I felt that he was bullying me. I was angry, frightened, bitter, and wronged all at once, and tears filled my eyes. I do not even hold it against you for trying to cheat me out of my dowry money. I am willing to lend you silver. Why are you still pressing me? When did I cheat you out of your dowry money? You said you wanted to marry me. I felt terribly wronged first. Su Chungyun had despised me for pickling vegetables and reeling silk. He had used the engagement to hold me in suspense and trick me into memorizing books and playing the zither for his amusement. Now Ji Yan Shu was using the words, ask for your hand, to tease me as well. Even the county magistrate could not force him to become his son-in-law. Why would he want to marry me? Could it not be that I truly like you and sincerely want to marry you? With red eyes, I asked him, what is good about me that would make you like me? He looked at me. What is not good about you? I froze. For a moment I was lost. What was not good about me? Oh, right. I pickled vegetables and sold produce. I smelled of pickled vegetables. I showed my face in public and stood in the street selling things. I was not a refined, dignified young lady. When the county magistrate's daughter passed by, even the wind seemed to carry her fragrance. She wore a veiled hat whenever she went out and smiled with shy reserve. What makes a woman virtuous? He asked. Quiet elegance is one form of virtue. Gentleness and kindness are another. Strength that does not yield is another as well. You pickle vegetables to earn a living. You neither steal nor rob. You can make a good life for yourself. Why is that not virtue? Is that so? But I raise silkworms and real silk. Have you ever seen silkworms? A whole large room filled with plump green silkworms. I sleep in the same room as them. I am crude and frightening, unlike other young ladies. Su Chungyun saw them once and was so disgusted that it was as though I were a silkworm demon. He laughed at me with his friends and said that perhaps only a silkworm demon would dare marry me. Amusement flickered in Ji Yan Shu's eyes again. In the future, I will raise them with you. With me? He swallowed a word and went on. If anyone dares call you crude and frightening, push it all onto me. Say that I am crude and frightening, while you are quiet and virtuous, understanding and considerate. Could you promise not to despise me? What did he mean? I had not even finished speaking. I hurried to continue. The food I cook is not good, the pastries I shape are ugly and dirty. You are a scholar with a delicate stomach. You will not be used to them, and you will surely despise them. I felt wronged, as though I could already see him frowning and picking at the food before him. You know how to cook, make pastries, pickle vegetables, raise silkworms, and reel silk. I only know how to read books. He looked at me, his eyes full of loneliness. Li Qingji, tell me honestly, do you despise me because I am only a useless scholar, useless in every practical way? His gaze was so sad that it seemed it would shatter at the lightest touch. I felt that something was not quite right, but my mouth was faster than my mind. What kind of logic is that? You are handsome, and you are good at your studies. Even though your home is a bit poor, the neighborhood aunties want to make matches for you. It is only because you refused the magistrate's family that everyone thinks your future must be extraordinary. You have to save marriage for someone who can help you rise to greater heights. A ladder to the sky? His eyes were full of hurt. So you see me that way too, I choked. I realized I had blurted out all the gossip and speculation the neighborhood aunties usually had about him. I stared at him helplessly and could not say another word. I lowered my head and twisted my fingers. My voice became very small. That is what the storytellers in the street always say. A poor man passes the examinations and becomes the top scholar overnight. Then he abandons the wife who shared his hardship, marries a princess or a wealthy young lady, rises into office, and never returns to his old hometown. It was only one sentence, yet for some reason my eyes filled with tears. Ashamed, I secretly wiped them away, but he caught my hand, lifted my face, and wiped away my tears for me. I only like you, I will not marry anyone else. Then he smiled. If you are truly worried, I will not compete to become the top scholar. Then you will become the second-ranked scholar instead? Huh? Is that possible? My mind was muddled. I kept feeling that something was wrong. In my heart, I thought I ought to ask the street storytellers whether the second-ranked scholar abandoned the wife who had shared his hardship as well. Something had gone terribly wrong. I had clearly gone to make things clear with him. How had he tangled me up until a matchmaker came to my door to ask for my hand? Ji Yan Shu wanted to become engaged to me. He said, if you are afraid that I am faithless, that I am only trying to coax you out of your dowry money and leave you a discarded wife, then we can become engaged first. We can marry after I take the spring examination and palace examination next year. He was handsome, his voice was gentle and pleasant. His eyes, when he looked at me, were like wine, intoxicating and irresistible. I was so dizzy that I actually nodded. Now that a matchmaker had come to ask for my hand, how could I bear to refuse a man like that? Then we would become engaged. I had already dissolved one engagement after all. If after the spring examinations next year, he married a princess or a wealthy young lady, I would simply dissolve another one. The neighbors all learned that Ji Yan Shu and I had become engaged. He did not merely send a matchmaker to ask for my hand. He solemnly completed the full traditional betrothal process. The 3 letters and 6 rights, he said. You are the wife I want to marry properly. I will leave none of the customary requirements unmet. The full formal betrothal, the 4 traditional live offerings, the 5 traditional gold wedding pieces, and an 8-bearer bridal sedan. I was flustered and felt that none of it was real. I could not stop myself from clutching my money pouch tightly. What 5 traditional gold wedding pieces? Where would the 8-bearer bridal sedan come from? Was he going to empty my dowry to marry me? Ji Yan Shu did not take my money. He returned the 50 taels on the very day he coaxed me into becoming engaged. On the day he sent the formal betrothal gifts, he also delivered 60 taels in gift money, a formal birthdate letter, a pair of live geese, 4 bolts of cotton cloth, 2 bolts of red silk liquor, meat and tea. There was also 1 packet each of red dates, peanuts, longans, and dried lotus seeds. He had also prepared a chest containing the 5 traditional gold wedding pieces and silver jewelry. I was not the only one stunned. The entire neighborhood stood open-mouthed in surprise. Had they not said that the Ji family was so poor, it had only 4 bare walls? Heavens, where on earth had all these betrothal gifts come from? I did not know. I only knew that Ji Yan Shu truly was not marrying me for my dowry money. As for what he was marrying me for, I did not dare think too deeply or believe too deeply. The moment I thought about it, even a little, my heart began to beat wildly and my face and ears burned. I did not know where to hide. Shu Chengyin made a great deal of money on that business trip. With a thick stack of banknotes in his hand, he and his father were surrounded by merchants who wanted to work with them and take a share of their business. Some congratulated them, while others flattered and fawned over them at the banquet as Su Chongyun watched a table full of people gather around him and his father, smiling, talking, and offering respectful praise. He suddenly understood some things. After the banquet, while strolling through the streets, he spoke with his servant, Ming Chun. Ming Chun, tell me, is it better to study or to do business? Ming Chun did not know how to answer at once. His master's thoughts had recently become harder and harder to predict. In the past, his master had put all his heart into studying, wanted to earn the highest civil service degree, become a great official, marry the daughter of a prominent family, and escape the merchant status he despised. Yet this time, he had suddenly agreed to travel with the old master to do business. Meng Chun guessed that it had something to do with what Miss Li had said before. At a small test in the academy a few days earlier, his master had ranked last and returned home. He sat blankly before the ancestral hall. Just then, Miss Li came to see him. Meng Chun heard his master ask her, "Li Qingji, do you look down on me as well?" Miss Li was bewildered. "Look down on your family's immense wealth?" His master glared at her, and Miss Li hurriedly added, "I do not look down on you. It is only that in studying you are as poor at it as I am. You are simply not good at scholarship." Miss Li was truly blunt. The moment she said that, his master's face twisted and his eyes looked as though he wanted to swallow someone alive. He stared at her fixedly. Before she had even swallowed, Miss Li hurried to add, "But you are good at business. Do not compare your studies to theirs. If you do business, you will surely be the best." Miss Li praised him sincerely. She said that she had seen him check ledgers and work an abacus. He only had to turn the pages of an account book a few times to find where the mistake lay. When he worked the abacus, the clatter of the beads was smooth and pleasant, even more pleasing than when he plucked the zither strings. His whole bearing became lively and bright. If he devoted himself to business, he would surely accomplish great things. But his master had always looked down on Miss Li. At the time, he did not listen at all and even appeared dismissive. "What do you know? Scholars, farmers, artisans and merchants. The merchant stands lowest among them. What good is it to be the best at trade?" He would not listen to Miss Li. Before that, he had bullied her relentlessly. He had even torn apart the bridal gown she had sewn. Meng Chun thought of this and answered cautiously, "Master, I cannot read and do not understand business. As your servant sees it, both studying and doing business are good things." Su Chengyan laughed. "You are slippery enough." Then he asked, "Who do you think is better, Li Qingji or the county magistrate's daughter?" Meng Chun nearly went numb. He could not understand what his master was playing at. Had his master not always valued the magistrate's daughter most highly? Every time he saw her, he followed after her, flattering her. He praised her pastries for their pretty shapes, and said that they smelled delicious before anyone had tasted them. He praised the scented sachets she embroidered as fine and lifelike. He bought her gold hairpins and rouge. Unfortunately, the magistrate's daughter gave all her pastries and scented sachets to her older male cousin. No matter how much his master flattered her, she never accepted his advances, and she would not even give him so much as half a pastry to taste. As for the sachets, he could only stand aside and watch her cousin wear them with envy. When Miss saw that he liked them, she painstakingly embroidered one for him, yet he acted as though he had been insulted. He not only threw it to the ground in contempt but stomped on it several times and ground it into ruin. "What worthless trash is this? Am I only worthy of receiving a sachet from you?" Even Meng Chun could not bear to look at Miss Li's expression then. In Meng Chun's view, the sachet Miss Li had embroidered was not inferior in any way. The fabric was exactly the sort his master used, and she had secretly asked about his preferences before blending the fragrance inside. A little sachet like that had probably required Miss Li to pickle many vegetables and reel much silk before she could earn back its cost. How could it have been worthless trash? The same had been true of the meals and pastries Miss Li brought before. His master had never even taken a bite. Every word and look from him conveyed nothing but disgust and contempt. He had even insisted on giving the food to beggars in front of her. Miss Li was amusing in her own way. If his master did not like something, she would not make it again. When she was angry, she would lean close to his ear and speak with cool sarcasm. "The county magistrate's daughter makes pastries that are exquisite and pretty. They must be delicious. Have you eaten them? What do they taste like?" His master would fly into a rage. He had people replace every book in the chest that Miss Li had spent 2 months painstakingly memorizing. After that, every time she finished one book, he replaced it with another. Meng Chun could see that Miss Li had only been trying her best to ease her relationship with his master and show that she could manage a household. Unfortunately, his master did not see her at all. Little by little, Miss Li stopped coming to please him. She no longer tried to memorize the books in the chest, which saved him the trouble of replacing them. Before his master had torn apart the bridal gown Miss Li had made. This time, before leaving on the business trip, for some reason he had told Meng Chun to bring her a new bridal gown to embroider, made from better cloth than before and accompanied by gold thread. Could it be that his master no longer despised Miss Li and wanted to marry her? Meng Chun's thoughts moved quickly. He answered carefully, "The county magistrate's daughter comes from a better family, but she is not as pretty as Miss, nor does she treat you as considerately." Su Chengyun smiled smugly. "She has her strengths too. In the end, a woman married into the family is only there to continue the line. What else can one expect? The county magistrate's daughter has a slightly better birth than Li Qingji, but she is only the daughter of a petty county magistrate. What benefit would there be in marrying her? There would be none, and I would still have to honor her like an ancestor. Li Qingji, though, is not bad. If she wants to live a rich life, she must flatter me and coax me. If I tell her to go east, she will not dare go west. If I tell her to bring me water to wash my feet, she will run to do it. Just thinking about it feels comfortable." Meng Chun understood. His master had finally started to think Miss Li was good, but he could not lower his pride to say that he wanted to marry her, so he was building a ladder for himself to climb. Meng Chun immediately echoed him. "Master is right. Miss Li is not only pretty and gentle, more importantly, she cares deeply for you. In her eyes, Master is the greatest businessman under heaven, a man of tremendous ability who can accomplish great things. I think Miss Li has a discerning eye and understands you. Is there not a saying? To gain a beauty in life, what more could one ask? To hell with beauty," Su Chengyun said with a laugh, kicking him lightly. "It is to gain a true confidant in life. What more could one ask?" Meng Chun laughed along. "That is exactly what this servant meant. This is why Master is good at studying too. Master understands both business and scholarship. How many people in the world can compare with you?" Pleased by the coaxing, Su Chengyun said smugly, "Fine then, I will marry her. She has not yet reached the level of a true friend, but after all these years, I am used to the sight of her. She memorized books and learned to play the zither. She did not learn very well, but her heart was sincere enough. Her father also did the Su family a favor. Marrying her would save some gossip. I will suffer a small loss and fulfill her wish." Meng Chun knew very well that Miss had not touched the zither in a long time and no longer memorized books. His heart gave a small jolt. Could it be that Miss no longer wanted to marry his master? Remembering what Madame Su had said before the business trip, Ming Chun could not help reminding him, "Before we set out, Madame said that she would go to the Li family and dissolve the engagement on your behalf. At the time, Master said to let Madame decide. Is it possible that, now that we have returned, the engagement has already been dissolved?" Su Chengyun was not concerned in the least. "Do you think she would agree to end the engagement? She waited 3 years. Now that she is so close to getting what she wants, would she agree to dissolve it?" Su Chengyun sneered, full of confidence. "I would wager that even if she cried, caused a scene and threatened something drastic, she would never agree to end the engagement. Besides the Su family, where would she find such a good marriage if she ended it? Would she not simply let that bully notice her and force her into becoming his wife?" Meng Chun had told Su Chengyun about the bully. The very first time Miss Li came to the Su household with the marriage contract and betrothal token. At the time his master had been listening to opera in the theater. Just as Meng Chun mentioned it, Su Chengyun had praised the singer and rewarded the performer with a pouch of silver. Meng Chun thought his master had not heard him and had wanted to report it again, but he did not dare disturb his master's pleasure in listening to the opera, so he set it aside. Later, as his master's attitude toward Miss Li became increasingly contemptuous, Meng Chun did not dare bring up her troubles again for fear of upsetting him. It turned out that it was not that Su Cheng had failed to hear, he simply did not care. He had never thought of Miss Li's life or death at all. Meng Chun thought that the bully had died not long ago, but he also felt that his master would not care. In his master's heart, even if Miss Li had truly ended the engagement, she would surely return at once as long as he crooked a finger. Meng Chun did not know what his master would do if Miss Li truly refused to marry him. Once Ji Yan Shu and I were engaged, it was somewhat more acceptable for an unmarried couple to visit each other. The neighbors did not gossip much. At most they teased us a little. "Master Ji is here to help Li girl pickle vegetables again?" The courtyard gate was wide open. The neighborhood aunties would poke their heads in as they passed, take a look and toss out a teasing remark. Ji Yan Shu always answered them calmly, while I was mortified. I wanted to shut the gate, but he would not allow it. "Closing the gate in broad daylight would not be good for your reputation, even if we are engaged," he said. So I tried to send him home. His hands were meant for reading and writing, and I could not bear to let him soak them in pickle brine with me. Ji Yan Shu said, "In the future you and I will be husband and wife. Husband and wife should do everything together." "Move aside a little. This stone is so large, do not let it hit you. How could it hit me? I always did everything myself before. As I watched him help me work without the slightest disdain, warmth filled my heart. A woman truly had to choose the right man to marry. Living with one person was not the same as living with another. When Shu Chongyun had too much free time, he would sometimes visit my small courtyard, mainly to mock me and amuse himself. If he came when I was pickling vegetables, he had never helped. When Ming Chun tried to help, Shu Chongyun even kicked him and asked whether he had become too idle. That was still not the worst of it. He would throw stones into my pickle jars. When I panicked because I was afraid he would break them, he would laugh loudly and say that it was fun enough. We had dissolved the engagement. I would no longer think of that hateful man. I should look more closely at the person before me. Winter was approaching. I was afraid Ji Yan Shu's hands would crack from soaking in pickle brine. I took out a jar of hand salve to rub on them, but he caught my hand and applied it to mine instead. His large hands enclosed my smaller ones. I rubbed and rubbed while our 4 hands tangled together. You apply it for me. I will apply it for you. By the time our palms had warmed, our faces were hot as well. For one moment, our eyes met and we could not help laughing together. Our faces grew hotter, our hearts beat wildly, and neither of us was willing to draw our hands back. First, how good it was to be engaged. Ji Yan Shu would help me pickle vegetables and I would bring him meals. People said Ji Yan Shu was poor and had only 4 bare walls. That was not without reason. His home was truly cold and sparse. There was only 1 well in the small courtyard and 1 rack for drying things. In the kitchen there was only a single set of pots and utensils, and the stove was often cold and the pots empty. In his room, there was only 1 bed with bedding and 1 wardrobe. The study was more alive. Books, paintings, brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones filled the room. I could imagine him reviewing books and composing essays, until he forgot mealtimes, grabbing something simple to eat or not eating at all. How could that do? Today I made fragrant crisp cakes. Tomorrow I would make scallion pancakes with tofu soup and egg drop soup. When the weather turned cold, I would stew a bowl of goat offal soup and make a pot of little wontons. Whatever I had, I would carry a portion to him. At first I brought the food shyly, afraid he would disdain such simple meals for having no fine fish or meat dishes and looking greasy or unclean, but he ate everything with great relish and left his bowls clean. He praised my skill and said that I was gentle and virtuous. He had found a treasure. I smiled to myself. He was not bad either. After eating, he even washed the bowls and chopsticks clean and returned them to me. On the winter solstice he bought pork, and we wrapped dumplings together in the kitchen by the light of 1 oil lamp. We sat at the same table and ate together. Outside the sky was pitch black. Inside the oil lamp shone brightly, and steam rose from the dumplings and soup. In the heart of winter, even our small corner of the world felt warm. After I had eaten a bowl of dumplings and a bowl of soup, he sat at the table looking at me blankly for a moment. He said, "Li Qingji, I regret something." I was so startled that I scalded my tongue and dropped the dumpling in my mouth. He was quick enough to catch it with his hand, then casually wiped away the filling that had stuck to the corner of my mouth. Before I could even be embarrassed, I stared at him wide-eyed, wanting to know what he regretted. Had he eaten my food all these days and now wanted to dissolve the engagement? My eyes gradually turned fierce. He laughed. "I regret telling you that we should not marry until after the spring examination. I am going to the capital and I will be away for at least half a year. What if you hear some rumor and marry someone else before I return?" For some reason, his words made my chest swell, and I could not keep myself from feeling pleased. I raised my chin and gave a small huff. "Do not ask me, that is for you to worry about. Think of a way yourself. Li Qingji is so good. Plenty of people want to marry me. Of course you should be worried." He pinched my cheek and sat back down. His brows drew together as he sank into thought. I watched him as though he were truly trying to find a solution, as though I really might be coaxed away or stolen by someone else. I could not help laughing to myself, but I also felt a little sorry for him. I wanted to tell him that I was not easily fooled and would not leave him. Then I held it back, let him miss me a little. Perhaps he would return sooner that way. I smiled to myself. I really was wicked. At the end of winter, Shu Chongyun hurried home. Along the way, he felt restless. He did not know why. He only desperately wanted to see Li Qingji and tell her that he no longer intended to bury himself in books and scholarship. He wanted to begin doing business seriously and become the richest merchant under heaven. He also wanted to tell her that he was no longer curious about her. He could marry her now. He wanted to ask whether she had finished embroidering her bridal gown. Of course, asking was unnecessary. She wanted to marry him so much that she must have finished it long ago. Even if she had not, it did not matter. He would hire embroiderers. He could hire as many as he needed, and have it finished in as few days as he wished. All the way home he imagined how delighted Li Qingji would be. When he said he wanted to marry her, his heart was sweet with it, and he felt both smug and satisfied. When he reached home, his mother told him that the engagement with Li Qingji had already been dissolved. It had cost only 100 taels of silver and 2 modest gift poles for Li Qingji to agree. Su Chengyun froze. His mind went blank, and he could not understand it. 100 taels. It was only 100 taels. How could Li Qingji agree to dissolve the engagement? He ground his teeth so hard that his face twisted with hatred. He did not believe that Li Qingji had willingly agreed. He had to find her and ask her clearly. Yes, he had to ask. He also had to tell her that he truly was willing to marry her now. Perhaps she had seen that he had not treated her well before, and had not wanted to marry him, so she ended the engagement. Now he would tell her that he was willing to marry her. As long as she said that she had been wrong and agreed happily to marry him, he would not hold the matter of ending the engagement against her. He told Meng Chun to bring the gifts he had bought for her along the way and go to the Li family to find Li Qingji. Meng Chun hesitated and stammered. I heard that Miss Li has already become engaged. It was like a heavy hammer striking him. Shu Chengyun's head buzzed. Who had she become engaged to? Even if she had ended their engagement, how could she have become engaged so quickly? What blind man had taken a liking to her, or had that bully forced her to marry him? Shu Chengyun felt he could not remain at home and listen to this. He wanted to go to the Li family himself and ask Li Qingji directly. When Shu Chengyun came to my door, Ji Yan Shu and I were taking the pickled vegetables that had finished soaking out of the jars, preparing to sell them at the market. He came storming in with his attendants and looked Ji Yan Shu up and down. When he saw Ji Yan Shu in a plain scholar's robe and wearing nothing valuable, he smiled coldly with contempt. I thought you had been forced to marry a bully, but looking at this man must be one you chose for yourself. What kind of taste is that? He is no different from you. He is another dirt poor man. Then he saw the pickled vegetables we were taking out. Are you planning to pickle vegetables all your life? Does he not even have the ability to support you? He looks like a weak scholar, unable to carry a load or lift a thing. Does he expect you to support him? He did not distinguish right from wrong. He mocked and sneered for a while, as though he had finally vented the resentment in his heart. After letting out a long breath, he said to me, Li Qingji, come here and apologize. Say you were wrong and should not have ended the engagement. I will not hold it against you. We will treat the ending of the engagement as though it never happened. After the new year, I will marry you. Once we marry, you will be the young mistress of the Su family. You will not have to pickle vegetables, reel silk, or do any of that rough work. You can enjoy comfort. Would that not be good? By the end, his voice had somehow taken on a coaxing tone. His eyes remained fixed on me as though he feared I would refuse. I had never seen Shu Qian like this, and did not know what madness had brought him here. But I disliked every mocking word he had said. I had never wanted to rely on the Su family to enjoy comfort. I was able-bodied, I could earn silver and live well by myself. When I came to you before, it was only because you were my fiancé before the engagement ended. I did not dare argue with you too much. Or rather, I did not have the confidence to argue, because no matter how I argued, you would not believe that I had not set my eyes on the Su family's wealth and only wanted a rich life. Su Chengyun nodded again and again. I know. I know you do not covet wealth. That bully wanted to force you to marry him. You came to the Su residence only to seek peace and safety. Before I misunderstood you, and did not treat you well. Now I understand. From now on, I will treat you well. Will you come back? He knew since when no, none of that mattered anymore. We ended the engagement. I will not marry you. I took Ji Yan Shu's hand to make it clear that I was already engaged. Jealousy flashed in Su Chengyun's eyes, yet he still held his chin high and said loudly to Ji Yan Shu, Are you stupid? Li Qingji refuses to marry me, and instead wants to marry a dirt poor man like you. Meng Chun truly could not bear to hear his master call Ji Yan Shu a dirt poor man every time he opened his mouth. He stepped forward with a miserable expression and stammered softly, Master. Master Ji passed the provincial examination not long ago. He is a provincial graduate now. Su Chengyun suddenly turned to look at Ji Yan Shu, who had remained calm and elegant from beginning to end. Jealousy reddened Su Chengyun's eyes. He laughed, and the laugh was full of mockery. Li Qingji, you are impressive indeed. It turns out that you despise me in your heart as well. The moment a provincial graduate came to ask for your hand, you looked down on me, a merchant, and hurried to dissolve the engagement. I saw his furious, jealous, and unwilling expression, and knew that he had once again trapped himself in a dead end. I did not understand why he had suddenly taken on the attitude of refusing to marry anyone but me, but it was better to make some things clear. I sighed and looked at him. Shu Chungyun, from beginning to end, it was you who despised and looked down on me. You despised my family's fallen circumstances, my poor home, and the fact that I made a living by pickling vegetables and reeling silk, which you saw as vulgar and lowly. You despised the ordinary meals I cooked, the pastries I made for not being refined enough, and the fact that I was not a sheltered young lady or skilled in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. You despised my birth, and because of that, you despised the sachet I made. Even though that sachet used the finest silk and contained the finest incense, you still disliked it. You even felt that my giving you a sachet was an insult to you. Shu Chungyun remembered the past and hurried to explain. Before, I cut him off. It does not matter anymore. Once I realized that you even despised yourself, I let go. Shu Chungyun froze. I said, "You do not only despise me. You also look down on yourself. Your family has immense wealth, fine clothes, and rich food, yet you despise your merchant background. You think your status is low and that you will never be accepted into respectable society. You put half your mind into studying, and the other half into wanting to marry the daughter of a wealthy family. It was not because you liked her so deeply, it was because you wanted to escape the status of a merchant and have the world respect you. But the person who looks down on you most has always been yourself. In the past, Shu Chungyun had constantly compared me with the county magistrate's daughter and said I was inferior to her in every way. He forced me to memorize books and learn the zither. I could memorize the books, but I could not play the zither well. Because of his words, I had once believed that I was crude and not good enough, that I was inferior to sheltered young ladies in every way. But later, I thought it through. How could anyone in the world be perfect? The county magistrate's daughter knew embroidery and the zither, but she certainly did not know how to raise silkworms and reel silk. Embroidery and zither playing were her skills. Raising silkworms and reeling silk were mine. The zither could not fill my stomach, but reeling silk could. I was not the county magistrate's daughter, so why should I compare my life with hers in every way? She had her good points and I had mine. I only needed to live my own life well. Shu Chungyun wanted to marry the daughter of a wealthy family. I was not one and I could not become one. Even if I played the zither very well, and memorized that entire chest of books until my head buzzed, I still would not be one. He would still despise me, just as he had despised the sachet I embroidered no matter how good its fabric and fragrance were. Since he despised me, I would not marry him. At first I did not understand these things. But when Ji Shu came to ask for my hand, he did not dislike the smell of the pickled vegetables I made. He did not think it shameful that I stood in the street selling goods. Instead, he thought that I was capable and strong because I knew how to pickle vegetables and reel silk. Everything Shu Chungyun disliked about me, Ji Yan Shu thought was good. Only then did I gradually understand. It was not that I was not good enough. It was that Shu Chungyun was not good enough. He was pitiful. He even despised himself. But now I have thought it through. You are the one who made me understand it. Shu Chungyun looked frightened. Sincerity and pleading filled his eyes. You said I had extraordinary talent for business. This time, I return to tell you that I am no longer going to study. I want to devote myself to business. I want to marry you. But why do you want to marry someone else already? But I do want to marry someone else in this world. Not everything would go as he wished simply because he had finally understood it. Shu Chungyun, you should marry someone else too. The Su and Li families no longer owe each other anything. Do not come looking for me again. My fiancé will not be happy. Ji Yan Shu had held my hand tightly the whole time. He must have cared about me too much and feared that the wealthy life offered by the Su family would make me waver and abandon him. Oh, I was truly in demand now. Ji Yan Shu was indeed frightened. After Shu Chungyun left, he began clinging to me and asking to marry earlier. I cannot wait until after the spring examination. Suppose that while I am away taking the examination, Shu Chungyun forces or coaxes you away, and you leave me to marry him. What then? I said. I was not that kind of person. But Ji Yan Shu refused to listen. He said it was not that he did not trust me. He did not trust the Su family. He could not feel at ease about Shu Chungyun. 3 times a day, he came to ask me again. Every day, he also sent a matchmaker to ask for an auspicious wedding date. He insisted that we had to marry before the new year, so that all the neighbors would know how impatient he was to marry his wife. The neighbors laughed and teased us about it every day. He was so troublesome, I truly could not stand him. Fine. We would marry. I was no longer afraid that he would pass the examinations and not return. If he did not come back, I would remarry. He could marry a princess or the daughter of a wealthy family. I could marry a second or third man. In any case, I could live my own life well. I nodded and the wedding preparations began. Ji Yan Shu took me with him to decorate the bridal chamber and prepare for the wedding. On the wedding day, even the jars of pickled vegetables had red wedding characters pasted on them. I could not help smiling. After we married, Ji Yan Shu was finally at ease enough to study for the examinations. After the new year, he would leave for the capital to take the examinations. One night after we had shared our bed, he suddenly asked, "You do not seem worried now that I will pass the examinations, marry a princess or a wealthy young lady, and leave you as an abandoned wife. Why is that?" I was worn out and my eyelids drooped with my guard down. I mumbled the truth. "What is there to fear? I have thought it through. If you do not return, I will remarry. I will not remain alone for the rest of my life, digging wild greens and waiting for you." Ji Yan Shu sprang upright, his inner robe hanging loose, fury tightening his face. "You have already planned to remarry?" I woke up fully in alarm and tried to explain in a flurry. No, it was only a hypothetical if you did not return." The more I explained, the worse it became. Ji Yan Shu's expression grew even more severe, utterly unlike the elegant scholar he was in the daytime. Afterward, he threw back the blanket and went straight to the study, sulking beside the oil lamp until midnight. For a long time after that, I could not coax him back into a good mood. During the day, he studied as usual. At night he remained just as demanding before throwing back the blanket and going to sulk beside the oil lamp in the study. After a while I became used to it. It did not seem to be anything serious, so I left him alone. Ji Yan Shu went to the capital for the examinations. Before he left, he pinched my cheek and told me to wait for him. He said that whether he passed or not, and whatever rank he earned, he would certainly return. I answered with a casual sounding, But in truth I believed that he would come back. There was no reason for it. I simply believed. Before leaving, Ji Yan Shu also told me that if I was free, I should go to the end of the street and listen to the storytellers. At first I did not pay attention. But one time, while walking past, I heard that the story told by the storyteller about the top scholar had changed completely. In the old stories, a poor man who became the top scholar would either abandon the wife who had shared his hardship or marry a princess or wealthy young lady, become an imperial son-in-law or great official, and never return to his hometown. But in the stories now, even if a poor scholar became the top scholar, and even if the emperor or powerful ministers pressured him to marry a princess or wealthy young lady, he would never compromise. Not only the top scholars, but also the second and third-ranked scholars in the tale books, did not forget the wives who had shared their hard years. They all returned to their hometowns in fine clothes to be reunited with their original wives. If they attained high office or military rank, the wives who had endured hardship with them would receive official honors. Husband and wife would work with one heart and grow old without parting. As I listened, my eyes reddened. I understood what Ji Yan Shu had been doing during those nights by the oil lamp. I cried and laughed at the same time, calling him a fool. What was so good about a wife who had shared hardship? How could that compare with marrying a princess or a wealthy young lady? That year, in the middle of spring, when flowers bloomed in riotous splendor, I was at home reeling silk. Suddenly, gongs and drums sounded noisily outside the door. Someone pounded on the gate. Children and neighbors came running to announce the good news first. "Ji family, open the door quickly. Great joy has come." I opened the door. The street was already packed with people inside and out. Voices rose in a noisy rush as everyone competed to deliver the news. "Congratulations, Madam Ji. Master Ji has become the top scholar. He has returned home in glory. Madam Ji is about to become the top scholar's wife." My heart pounded so hard that the sound of gongs and congratulations seemed to knock my soul loose and leave it floating in midair. Whether he was the top scholar or not, I did not know. I only knew that my husband had returned. Without thinking of anything else, I ran in the direction the neighbors pointed at the entrance to the alley. I saw him returning on a tall horse. When he saw me, he leaped down from the horse and held out his hand. His eyes held the same joy and stirring emotion as on the day he had come to ask for my hand. "I have returned my wife." A final word about Ji Yan Shu. Not long after he moved into that small alley, he noticed a household at the front where a young woman was exceptionally good at making a life for herself. Every day, cooking smoke rose from that small courtyard. Whenever he passed by, he smelled a different scent of ordinary life. The pancakes she fried were fragrant. The soup she cooked was sweet. He had bought pickled vegetables that she made. They were crisp, refreshing, and so appetizing that he ate more rice than usual. Every day she smiled happily, as though she had just found silver. Her smile was beautiful too. Her big round eyes shone brightly, filled with the light of life. She lived alone as well, yet her home was always lively. Stir-frying vegetables, chopping meat, pickling vegetables, reeling silk, weaving cloth, it was bustling in every way. His home was nothing like hers. Everywhere in his house he saw only 4 bare walls. There were pots and a stove, but they were always cold and lonely. What made them different? He wanted to know more about her, but he heard that she had long been engaged. He could not pry or give her too much attention. That would not be the conduct of a gentleman. The day he heard that she had ended the engagement, Ji Yan Shu's heart, which had never changed before, suddenly stirred. It was like a spring, bursting from a dead pond, bringing the whole pond to life. Only one thought remained. He had to go and ask for her hand. She did not know what about her had moved him, and she did not know that her image had lived in his heart for not merely a year or two. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. The late autumn wind in Guiyun village carried a bone-deep chill. It swept through the old bamboo grove at the head of the village, making the leaves rustle with a lonely sound. Xiaomani hugged a small bundle wrapped in worn coarse cloth tightly against her chest, and silently looked at the 3-room thatched cottage in front of her. The roof had weathered many seasons of rain and sun. In several places, green moss clung to the old bamboo strips, already faded to a grayish-brown. A low mud fence surrounded the narrow courtyard, and near one corner stood an aged fig tree that had not yet shed all its leaves in the late autumn cold. The place looked bleak. No one had come out to welcome her. Only the icy wind brushed past the loose hair at her temples, and from some distant house in the hamlet came the faint smell of kitchen smoke, carrying a trace of faraway warmth. From now on, this desolate place would be her home. Ever since her parents had died one after another, in an epidemic when she was only 14, Manny's life had been like a drifting duckweed leaf tossed into a violent current. The uncle who took her in had not done so out of family affection. He had only been afraid of being mocked by the villagers for refusing to shelter an orphaned niece. Her aunt by marriage was sharp-tongued and harsh, always treating Manny as an unnecessary burden in the household. In those years there was never enough food to eat, never enough clothing to wear, and the heaviest chores, carrying water, splitting firewood, washing clothes, were all placed on her thin shoulders. 7 long years passed like a tear-soaked dream. During those 7 years, she learned to swallow her grievances back down into her own heart. She learned to lower her head and pass through the pitying and contemptuous eyes around her. In the end, her uncle married her off. This arrangement was not because he had found a good household where she could rely on someone for the rest of her life. It was simply because his own son had reached the age to take a wife. The family needed a large betrothal gift, and money was the only thing in his hands that could be exchanged for money. The people of Guiyun village whispered a great deal about this hurried marriage. Everyone pitied Manny's bitter fate. They said she was already past the best age for marriage, and now had to become a stepmother, caring for a 6-year-old child named Chen Qing. People often said that being a daughter-in-law in another family was already difficult, and being a stepmother was even more like walking along the edge of a sharp blade. One careless step, and a woman could carry an evil reputation for the rest of her life. Yet Mani only quietly packed a few old garments. She understood better than anyone that if she had lived, like an unwelcome guest even under the roof of her own blood relatives, how much worse could a stranger's roof truly be. Chen Ping'an came to meet her at the mouth of the narrow lane leading to the house. He was tall with broad, steady shoulders and dark skin, from many years of working the fields under the sun and rain. On his weathered, angular face, there was no welcoming smile and none of the awkward shyness a man might show when receiving a new wife for the first time. He only looked at her once with a direct, quiet gaze, then turned and walked straight into the front courtyard without saying a word. His manner did not feel rude or coarse. It was simply the distance of a man who had become so used to loneliness and silence that he seemed to have forgotten how to greet another person. Manny let out a long, soft breath to release a little of her tension, then followed his back into the house. Their wedding night passed in a silence, utterly different from the lively weddings she had heard others describe. There were no horns or drums, no crackling firecrackers, no relatives staying behind to offer cups of wine and tea in celebration. There were only 2 red candles flickering on an old wooden table, casting a weak glow over 2 people sitting opposite each other in a small, unfamiliar room. Chen Ping'an slowly poured a cup of warm tea and gently pushed it toward her. He did not look directly into her eyes. He lowered his head toward the tabletop, and in a low, hoarse voice, like dry earth cracked after a drought, he told her that he did not know how to speak sweet words or make distant promises. Manny lowered her eyes and quietly waited for him to continue. After pausing to take a sip of water, he said that since she had stepped through the Chen family's door, he would work hard, would never let her suffer hunger or cold, and would not allow anyone to mistreat or bully her. The man's words were not flowery. They carried no solemn vows of eternal love, no grand declarations of deep affection. They were only words of responsibility, plain, direct, and simple, just like him. Yet Manny felt something deeply real in them. They were far more genuine than all the polished lies she had heard for 7 long years in her uncle's house, where not a single promise had ever been kept. She lifted her clear eyes, still shadowed with sorrow, and gently replied that she had not entered this home hoping for wealth, rank, or a rich life. She only wished for a peaceful place where she could live steadily day by day and work with him to keep this small family warm. Only then did Chen Pinggan raise his eyes and look at her. Their gazes met for a brief moment, and then he quickly looked away again. In his low voice, he told her to sleep early, because there would be many household matters to handle the next day. It was already late when a small sound came from the corner of the room. On the little bed opposite them, 6-year-old Chen Qing was holding tightly to the old pillow that had belonged to her late mother. The child curled under a thin quilt, her round eyes hesitantly watching Xiaomani with guarded caution. It was not hatred or hostility. It was only the unfamiliar fear of a child who had lost her mother too early, like a tiny hedgehog trying to raise every sharp spine on its back to protect itself from the stranger who had suddenly entered her and her father's lives. Mani did not go closer, afraid of frightening the child. She only smiled gently, turned, lay down on the bed on her side of the room, and softly pulled up the quilt. Tonight, she told herself, let the little girl hold that old pillow and seek a little familiar warmth. She knew very well that some feelings and some trust in this world could never be rushed. Morning in Guiyun village began with a thin white mist hanging over the distant fields. From the head of the village came the sparse cries of roosters, slowly waking the houses still sunk in the biting cold of late autumn. Xiaomani had risen very early, while the sky was still dark and everything around her had not yet awakened. She stood in the narrow kitchen and looked around, familiarizing herself with every object. The clay stove was old. Cold ash from the previous meal lay gray around the stove base. The water jar in the corner was not full, only a little cloudy water remained at the bottom. In the bamboo basket hanging on the wall were a handful of wilted water spinach, and the last small fistful of rice, lying alone at the bottom of the grain container. Without a sigh, she silently lit the fire, boiled a pot of warm water, washed the little rice clean, and cooked a thin pot of porridge. The small fire began to crackle beneath the iron pot, and pale gray smoke slipped through the cracks in the bamboo door, drifting into the courtyard and blending with the morning mist. Everything in this small house was still strange and new to her. Yet deep in her heart, she had already begun to regard this place as home. At the very least, she told herself that she must work hard to turn it into a true home. Chen Pinggan woke when the first light appeared on the horizon. He stepped into the courtyard intending to wash his face as usual. His rough hand had already reached toward the stone's well when it stopped in midair beside the well. Someone had placed a clean basin of warm water. Thin steam rose from it in the cool morning air. He stood still and looked at that basin for a long while. Since his first wife, Liun, had died of a sudden, serious illness on a cold, rainy morning 3 years earlier, he had gradually grown used to managing everything in the house by himself. He had grown used to waking to a cold kitchen, to eating cold rice in a hurry before carrying his hoe to the fields, and to living in a lonely house without the sound of an adult's laughter or speech. It had been a very long time since anyone had prepared such small, caring things for him from behind. He bent down, scooped up warm water in his hands, and splashed it over his face. The warmth touched his weathered skin. It was such an ordinary sensation, yet in that moment it made his chest tighten slightly with emotion. He did not turn to look toward the kitchen where the fire was burning. He only quietly dried his face with a towel, picked up his hoe, and strode out to the fields. Chen Qing woke a little later than her father, as she always did. The little girl sat on the bed with her knees drawn up for a long while, her small hands still tightly holding her mother's old pillow. Her round eyes stared without blinking toward the little kitchen. When she smelled the fragrant cooked porridge, her small stomach growled with hunger. But the moment she saw Xiaomani carefully ladling porridge into bowls, she immediately turned her face away and put on a sulky expression. When Chen Qing sat down at the table in the outer room, she stubbornly folded her arms before her chest and refused to touch the bowl of porridge in front of her. Mani spoke softly, telling her that the porridge had cooled a little and that she should eat it while it warmed her stomach. The child lowered her head and refused to answer. After a while, she muttered that she did not want to eat. Mani patiently asked why, but the little girl only kept silent. In truth, it was not because the porridge was bad. The sweet smell of rice drifted straight into her nose and made her stomach growl again. But in the child's immature thoughts, eating food cooked by this woman meant agreeing to accept her as a mother. Accepting someone new would mean betraying the mother she had lost. Mani did not scold her or force her to eat. She only took a freshly steamed bun from the steamer, placed it beside the porridge bowl, and said gently, "If you do not want it now, leave it there. Eat when you are hungry." Then she turned away to do other household chores, treating it as though no tense moment had happened, so the child would not feel pressured. Chen Qing sat still and endured her hunger for about half a quarter of an hour. When she saw that Mani had disappeared into the back garden, she secretly reached out with her little hand and ate the steamed bun with great relish. In the following days, Chen Qing stubbornly kept her distance from Mani in every mischievous way a 6-year-old child could think of. She refused to let Mani comb her hair in the mornings. She would not let Mani hold her hand when they went around the village. Every morning, she waited until Mani had turned away, before secretly eating the food that had been carefully prepared on the table. Most of all, the child refused to call Mani by name or call her mother. Whenever she needed something, she used the words, "that person" instead. "That person help me get a bowl. That person help me close the door. What is that person doing in the garden?" It was as though the child had made a rule for herself. As long as she did not call Mani's name, she would not feel guilty toward her late mother. Mani understood the little girl's wounded heart, so she never took it to heart and never punished her. Chen Pinggan, meanwhile, was a rough, awkward man who did not know how to mediate. He could only watch everything from a distance. He saw his daughter stubbornly keep away from his new wife, and play little tricks to avoid her. He also saw Mani patiently and generously endure those things day after day, without showing weariness or resentment. Many times, he wanted to speak and warn Chen Qing to respect her elders, but whenever he opened his mouth, his throat seemed to close because he did not know what words would be right. He understood that his daughter missed her late mother too much. He also felt that he had no right to force the child to forget the woman who had given birth to her. Yet sometimes, when he looked at Mani's slender figure silently alone in the smoke-darkened kitchen, he felt an uneasy ache in his heart, a kind of pity he could not name. One afternoon when heavy rain poured down, Mani was hurriedly collecting the clothes drying in the courtyard when she suddenly heard a child's terrified cry from the lane. Startled, she turned her head and saw Chen Qing lying sprawled in a muddy puddle. A sharp stone had scraped open a large patch of skin on the little girl's knee, and bright red blood mixed with the rainwater. It turned out that the child had been chasing a lost chick, slipped and fallen hard. Without time to think, Mani rushed straight into the rain. Rainwater lashed her face so fiercely that she could barely open her eyes. She bent down and gently lifted the child into her arms, holding her tightly. Chen Qing instinctively panicked and struggled to get free, but the wound on her leg throbbed, her small hands trembled with cold, and in the end, she could only wrap her arms around Mani's neck and cry in fear. After carrying her into the warm little room, Mani quickly boiled some hot water, squatted before the bed, and gently used a soft cloth to wipe away the mud on the child's face, hands, and legs. Her movements were extremely careful, as if she were holding a precious piece of fragile porcelain. When she saw the rather deep scrape on the child's pale knee, she frowned with worry and heartache and asked whether it hurt very much. Chen Qing pressed her lips together to hold back her crying, but tears of grievance spilled down anyway. Mani lowered her head and softly blew cool breaths over the bleeding wound. The warm, gentle breath brushed the child's aching skin, and a strange feeling slipped into Chen Qing's mind. Somehow, her choked sobs slowly quieted and then stopped. Outside the doorway, Chen Ping'an had just returned from the fields. He stood silently under the eaves, his clothes soaked by rain, and looked into the room through the half-open window. He saw Mani tenderly holding and coaxing his daughter. He saw Chen Qing obediently lean her head against Mani's shoulder, without resisting, her little hand still clutching the rain-soaked edge of Mani's sleeve as if seeking safety. That plain, warm scene made the weathered man stop where he stood. He did not dare watch for too long, because a vague fear rose in his heart. He was afraid of remembering Liu Ni, He was afraid that this warm, happy feeling of family might once again become a luxury he would lose. So he silently turned away and sat alone by the cold well in the rain, letting the darkness surround him until night fell completely. Night came. The rain still pattered steadily on the old tiled roof. Chen Qing lay on the bed, still holding her mother's old pillow as always. Yet before she closed her eyes and drifted to sleep, she tilted her head slightly and quietly looked toward the outer room, where Xiaomani sat carefully mending a worn shoulder seam under the dim oil lamp. The warm yellow light fell over Manny's refined, gentle face. At some unknown moment, the child suddenly realized that this woman did not seem as frightening or hateful as she had once imagined. Her small hand tightened around the corner of her quilt. For the first time, a tiny warm feeling appeared in the heart of the 6-year-old child, like a small flame lit in the middle of a freezing winter. She still hesitated and did not dare approach, but her heart no longer felt so cold. After several days of heavy rain, the weather in Guiyun village gradually became much warmer and more pleasant. The ridges along the edge of the village began to be covered with fresh green sprouts. In the morning, Chen Pinggen carried his hoe to the fields as soon as the rooster crowed. Xiaomani stayed home, swept the front courtyard, fed the chickens, and then found time to tidy the small grain storehouse behind the kitchen. As soon as she pushed open the storehouse door, the familiar, slightly earthy scent of dried soybeans rushed toward her. She looked at the sacks of soybeans stacked neatly in the corner and froze for a moment. The soybeans were beautiful, each grain golden round and full, clearly the result of careful cultivation by their owner. There were so many that a small family of 3 could never finish them all if they were only used for household food. Yet Mani knew that if they sold all these unprocessed dried soybeans to the traders who came around the villages to buy crops, they would receive only about 20 copper coins per caddy, a price far too low for the labor a farmer had put in. But poor villagers in this remote place had no other choice. The roads were distant, and they could not bring their goods to the county market by themselves. That evening, over a simple meal, Manny raised her head and asked Chen Pinggen why, since the family had so many good soybeans stored, they did not process them into something else to use or sell for a better price. Chen Pinggen calmly picked up a piece of boiled vegetable and said in a low voice that they should leave the beans there and wait for the traders to come into the village as they did every year. Manny thought silently for a while, then boldly asked, "What if we use those soybeans to make fermented soybean paste and sell it?" The chopsticks in Chen Pingzan's hand stopped in midair. He slowly raised his head and looked straight into her eyes. His gaze was not suspicion or contempt. He was carefully judging whether his new wife truly understood what she was talking about. Mani did not avoid that probing look. She calmly and slowly explained that, when she was young, her maternal grandfather had personally taught her the traditional method for making soybean paste. Making a batch with the right flavor was not easy. It required the right weather, the right technique for growing the starter mold, and skillful hands. But if the batch succeeded, the value it brought when sold would be many times higher than selling unprocessed dried soybeans. The small house fell into an unusual silence. Even little Chen Qing, who was eating, curiously lifted her small face and looked between the two adults. Chen Pinggan thought for a long time. He had never been someone who liked taking risks. He was used to choosing safe steps and holding firmly to what he already had, rather than betting his labor on something new with an uncertain result. Yet when he looked into Manny's calm, confident, and certain eyes, he saw that this was not the reckless hope of an impulsive person. It was the look of someone who had already calculated carefully. In the end, he nodded and agreed to try. The next morning, the couple began the first step, selecting soybeans. The sacks were poured onto large bamboo trays in the middle of the courtyard. Manny squatted under the autumn sun, her hands moving quickly and carefully as she picked out every shriveled, worm-eaten, or spoiled bean. The work was repetitive, monotonous, and tiring. The sun climbed overhead and poured down fierce light. A few strands of hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, but she did not bother to brush them away. At first, Chen Pinggan thought she might only be speaking out of a moment of enthusiasm, wanting to prove herself. But from early morning until late noon, she patiently sat there, choosing each bean with care, and did not complain of fatigue once. He stood watching for a long while, then silently walked over and sat beside the bamboo tray to pick beans with her. During that time, neither spoke. In the space around them, there was only the light clicking of soybeans against the bamboo tray, and the sound of the chickens scratching for food in the corner of the courtyard. This was the first time since Mani had married into the Chen family that the two of them had sat so close for such a long time without feeling stifled by unfamiliar distance. After they finished selecting the best beans, Mani began roasting them. A large iron wok was balanced over the blazing firewood stove. She used a large wooden spatula to stir batch after batch with steady, even movements. Sweat dotted her forehead, and the sharp smoke from the stove reddened her eyes, yet her gaze never left the wok. She carefully watched the change in color of each soybean and adjusted the fire accordingly. If the beans were roasted a little too long, they would burn and ruin the flavor of the paste. If they were not roasted enough, the finished paste would lack its distinctive fragrance. Every small step required absolute care and patience. It could not be rushed. Late that afternoon, when Chen Pinggan stepped into the kitchen and saw that her slender hands had turned red from being near the stove heat for too long, his brows tightened unconsciously with concern. He told her to stop and rest for a while, saying that the work did not need to be done so urgently that it harmed her body. Mani looked up at him and smiled brightly. She said that if she finished one day earlier, the product could be sold one day earlier, and the family's finances would become a little less difficult. Hearing his wife's sincere words, Chen Pinggan suddenly felt his throat tighten, unsure how he should answer. He stood silently and watched her lower her head to continue working. He watched the stubborn strands of hair fall over her forehead again, and watched her unconsciously brush them away in exhaustion. A strange warm feeling flashed through his mind. It was not yet the deep affection between a man and a woman, at least that was what he told himself. It was respect. He felt that a good, hard-working woman like her deserved to be treated better by this life. In the days that followed, the husband and wife worked together on the process of cultivating the starter for the paste. Clean dry straw was spread out evenly. The treated soybeans were laid over it and carefully placed in dry, windless spots. Mani checked the starter every morning, every afternoon, and even before going to sleep. Her thoroughness was like that of a gentle mother anxiously caring for a sick child. Chen Pinggan could not help shaking his head and smiling to himself when he saw how careful she was, but when he saw the seriousness and devotion in her eyes, he could not bear to tease her. Later, the large clay jars used for fermenting the paste were moved into the center of the courtyard. Mani scrubbed each one clean inside and out, then set them under the sun for an entire day to dry and disinfect. The well water was cold enough to bite into the bone. Soaking her hands in it for too long made her fingertips red and wrinkled. At some point, whenever Chen Pinggan came home from fieldwork, he had unconsciously formed the habit of looking toward the front courtyard to search for Mani's busy figure. As long as he saw her safe and healthy, working in the yard, his heart would naturally feel a strange sense of ease and relief. Even he could not understand why he had formed such a habit. He only remembered one day when he returned to the mouth of the lane and looked into the courtyard, but did not see her. His chest tightened suddenly with alarm. Only when he heard her call from the small kitchen did he breathe out in relief. He stood silently in the courtyard for a long while, looking up at the vast sky, and felt deeply that something sacred and warm had appeared in his heart. Something he had stubbornly avoided and refused to admit to himself. In the other corner of the courtyard, a pair of small eyes had also been quietly observing Mani's every action. Chen Qing sat obediently on a little wooden stool, secretly watching Mani stir the paste in the jars. At first, the child watched out of curiosity. Gradually, this became an indispensable habit every afternoon. The little girl keenly noticed that although the woman was busy every day with countless tasks, she never once forgot to prepare tasty food suited to the child's appetite. She never forgot to mend torn places in the child's clothing or dry her cloth shoes whenever it rained. The child never said this out loud. She only sat quietly in a corner and watched. Sometimes, when she saw the chickens trying to run near the jars of paste, she would secretly run over and chase them away. On a late spring evening, a gentle, cool breeze blew past the eaves. Mani walked nervously toward the first jar of soybean paste and carefully opened the lid to check the result. A soft, rich fragrance immediately spread through the air. The smell of the paste was not harsh or unpleasant. It carried the distinctive mellow sweetness of well-fermented soybeans, a deep, full aroma like fertile earth after a summer shower. Joy lit up her eyes and a happy smile blossomed on her lips. Chen Pinggan stepped close to the jar, dipped the tip of a bamboo chopstick into a little paste and tasted it. The salty richness of the seasoning blended perfectly with the nutty sweetness of well-fermented soybeans. The fragrance was full, yet gentle, making a person instinctively want to taste more. He did not offer any ornate praise, he only nodded slightly with satisfaction, but the joy and pride in his eyes said everything. Seeing her father and that person so happy, Chenqing also ran over with curiosity and excitement. The little girl sniffed the fragrant paste with her small nose and burst into clear laughter. That childish laughter rang through the courtyard in the late afternoon light, sweeping away the cold, gloomy air that had lingered there for years. Manny watched the father and daughter enjoy themselves together, and an indescribable warmth rose in her heart. She carefully ladled some paste into several small ceramic bowls, and softly asked Chen Pinggan whether they should take these bowls to the nearby neighbors as samples. Chen Pinggan was briefly stunned. She had just worked so hard to make something good enough to sell for money, yet the first thing she thought of was sharing it with others. For a moment, he could not fully understand the logic of her generous heart. Yet when the words came from her gentle mouth, he felt that it was completely reasonable. He answered briefly, agreeing with her decision. That evening, the sweet fragrance of soybean paste drifted through the courtyard on the cool spring breeze, over the green bamboo fences, and into the peaceful little lane nearby. For the first time after many long years of loneliness and pain, the small house of the 3 members of the Chen family no longer looked cold and dim as it had before. Instead, it carried the warmth of family and the hope of a better life beginning to grow. Good news travels far, but bad news has wings faster than a fierce wind. Within just a few days after Xiaomani gave the first bowls of paste to several neighbors to taste, the small village of Guiyun became lively with discussion. Those who sincerely accepted the gift praised the smooth texture, natural golden color, and unforgettable savory sweet flavor. They said that one small spoonful, over a bowl of hot white rice, was enough to make a delicious meal. Soon people began coming to the Chen house to buy it, some carrying chipped ceramic bowls, some carrying small clay jars, each face full of eagerness to bring the tasty seasoning home. However, life is never completely smooth, and not everyone can rejoice in another person's good fortune. Aunt Li, who lived at the entrance of the lane, was known throughout the area for her sharp tongue and love of gossip. That morning she stood with hands on her hips before her gate, curled her lips, and told several women passing by on their way to market that no one knew from what dirty corner the new daughter-in-law of the Chen family had learned the trade of making paste. In a mocking voice, she said that whether the paste was good or bad was one matter, but a person with such hidden intentions surely had something shameful in her heart. Besides, she added, a stepmother who rushed it overly kind and virtuous might not necessarily refrain from treating her husband's child cruelly later. Manny heard these malicious words late one afternoon, when a little girl from a neighbor's house came over to play, and innocently chattered about the whole matter. Manny stood still beside the well for a long while, her hands tightening slightly on the edge of her worn coarse dress. Then she quickly regained her usual calm, gently thanked the child, and walked into the kitchen to light the fire and cook dinner as if nothing had happened. Chen Pinggan, however, could not remain silent and endure the insult as his wife did. He heard the rumors from a man who worked the eastern field with him. The man repeated them in a serious, mysterious tone, saying Aunt Li was spreading everywhere that the Chen family was careless in business, that no one knew what dirty ingredients were in their paste, and that if villagers ate it and fell sick with stomach pains, who would take responsibility? Through the boneless tongue of gossip, groundless rumors were embroidered and distorted. Initial doubts about the origin of the craft quickly became accusations that the Chen family's paste had been rushed, had not fermented long enough, and was even unsanitary. When Chen Pinggan came home at dusk, his angular face was dark with suppressed anger. Manny was squatting before the kitchen door, blowing the fire. The flickering flames lit her graceful face. Seeing his heavy expression and the angry light in his eyes, she stopped fanning the stove and gently asked whether something unpleasant had happened in the fields. Chen Pinggan stood rooted at the threshold of the cramped kitchen, his rough hand clenched so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He kept silent for a long time as if controlling his anger, then told her in a low voice all the insults people were spreading about her. She listened attentively, her clear eyes fixed on him without interrupting. When he finished, the little kitchen fell into a deep silence, broken only by the crackle of dry firewood under the pot. Manny looked down at the steaming rice for a moment, then let out a soft breath of relief. She told him calmly that their family's paste had been made completely according to the traditional method. The fermentation time had been full, and her hands had always been kept clean. She said that once people had deliberately chosen to suspect them, arguing with words would be useless. The only way to make them genuinely convinced was to let them taste it themselves and see with their own eyes. Chen Pinggan frowned in confusion and asked whether, after suffering such grievance, she truly felt no anger at all. Manny raised her head and looked straight into his eyes. Her gaze carried genuine composure, not a forced strength meant to hide pain. She said softly that anger would solve nothing and would only make her more exhausted, while the paste in the jars still needed to be sold so the family could live. After pausing briefly, she suggested that if he truly wanted justice for her, then the next time someone came to buy paste, he should invite that person to the back courtyard to see the clean work process with their own eyes. He looked deeply into her steady eyes for a long while, then turned and left without another word. Yet the very next morning, when Madame Wang from the neighboring hamlet came carrying a jar to buy paste, Chen Pinggan, usually silent and reserved, suddenly became strangely proactive. He led Madame Wang to the corner of the courtyard and briefly explained each step, how they carefully selected every soybean, how they roasted them with just the right fire, and how they watched the fermentation days with care. His words were short, plain, and practical. Madame Wang nodded again and again in approval. Not only did she hesitate no longer, she happily bought an additional large jar to take home. Thanks to that frankness, Aunt Li's malicious gossip did not vanish at once, but it began to thin out and eventually faded because no one believed it anymore. Just as this difficulty passed, a greater challenge came upon the small family. About 2 weeks later, while the paste business in the village was going smoothly, a trader named Chu Mao drove a horse cart down from the county town to the Chen house. Chu Mao had long held a monopoly over buying all the farm produce and dried soybeans from Guiyun village. He always pressed prices as low as possible, but none of the poor villagers dared complain, because they had neither transport nor any practical way to take their goods to the distant county market themselves. After hearing that the Chen family had made delicious paste that sold very well, Chu Mao came to see Chen Pinggan with a false smile. He said with false enthusiasm that he wanted to order a large quantity of paste to sell in the county for profit. Chen Pinggan had not yet opened his mouth to discuss the matter when Chu Mao quickly offered a purchase price of 15 copper coins for a large jar. Mani, working in the corner of the courtyard, paused when she heard that meager number. She knew very well that even in their own village she sold a jar of the same size for 25 copper coins, and people still competed to buy it before supply ran out. Chu Mao clearly wanted to rely on his monopoly to suppress and bully her family from the very beginning. He had grasped the Chen family's weakness. They had never had the connections or sales channels to sell their goods outside the village. Chen Pinggan's face showed no expression. He only looked up coldly and asked the trader why he had offered such a cheap price of 15 copper coins. Chu Mao babbled an explanation, saying the road from the village to the county was far and difficult. Transportation costs were high, and he could not be sure whether county people would accept the flavor of this rural paste. He claimed he would be taking a great risk and that 15 copper coins was already a generous favor to the family. Chen Pinggan did not answer. The atmosphere in the courtyard became tense. Noticing that the situation was turning bad, Manny took the initiative to step closer. In a soft voice, she thanked Master Chu for his thoughtful concern for their family. Then she tactfully refused, explaining that the amount of paste they were making could not even meet demand inside Guiyun village. For the moment, their family was not yet able to accept such large orders. She politely told the trader that when they made more goods later, they would certainly invite him over to discuss business again. Chu Mao glanced at her with a very displeased and angry look. But faced with her gentle yet firm attitude, he could find no reason to criticize them. He could only leave with a sullen face. That night, after their daughter had fallen asleep, Chen Pinggan sat for a long time on the porch under the dim moonlight. Manny silently brewed a pot of warm tea, brought it out, and sat gently beside him, without speaking first, afraid of adding to his worry. After a while, he sighed and asked whether refusing Chu Mao so directly during the day had truly been the right decision. Looking at the dark courtyard before him, he expressed his concern that Chu Mao was wealthy and well-connected in the county. If the trader felt offended and bore a grudge against their family, the consequences would be hard to predict. Manny looked at her husband's anxious face and calmly said that if Chu Mao became angry, at most he could spend money to smear and slander them before outsiders for a while. But if their family surrendered to his unfair price from the beginning, then forever after they would be held by the throat and pressed down by him, never having a chance to raise their heads. She turned to him and gently asked what he thought of her view. Chen Pinggan did not answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the darkness of the courtyard, where the clay jars of paste stood quietly under the bright moon. After a long time, he slowly admitted that he had always been a rough man who only knew how to farm and was not good at calculating business matters. Manny smiled and softly advised him that since he was skilled at plowing, hoeing, and working the land, he should focus on those things. As for the calculations of trade, he could leave them to her. Husband and wife would each carry one part and support the family together. He turned to look deeply at her face. The soft moonlight shone on her graceful features, bringing out the calm yet unshakable steadiness of the woman beside him. In that moment, Chen Pinggan suddenly realized that Mani was not rash or impulsive at all. She always thought things through carefully before deciding, just as she carefully made each jar of paste and never allowed herself to skip any tiny step out of impatience. He nodded, his heart full of trust, and said that from then on, he would fully listen to her arrangements. But the dishonest trader Chu Mao was indeed not someone who would easily let go of revenge. About 2 weeks later, malicious rumors began to appear and spread from the month-end market fair in the area. People said the Chen family's paste was made deceitfully, that the process was unsanitary and would produce poison if stored too long, and even that someone had bought it, eaten it, and fallen seriously ill. No one knew where these groundless rumors had come from. Yet panic made many villagers in Guiyun begin to hesitate. The number of people coming to the Chen house to ask for paste decreased visibly day by day. Chen Pinggan came home from the fields with a heavy, exhausted face. This time, even Mani fell silent for quite a while after hearing what had happened. Her silence was not because she was frightened, helpless, or at a loss. It was because she was concentrating on finding the most thorough solution. Beside the flickering oil lamp, husband and wife sat quietly leaning on each other. Outside the porch, the autumn wind still rustled through the thatch with a faint sadness. At last, Manny raised her head and told her husband that she had thought of a way to reverse the situation, but it would absolutely require his wholehearted help. He looked directly into her eyes. Without hesitation and without asking what the method was, he simply told her to say it and he would do it. She proposed that at the large county market next month, the two of them should bring all the remaining paste from the storehouse straight to the center of the county market and hold a free tasting for the people there. Anyone who tasted it and liked it could buy a jar if they wished. Whoever did not like it would be accepted cheerfully. In this way, the family would not need to waste effort defending itself or arguing with malicious rumors. The quality and flavor of the paste would speak for itself. Chen Pinggan frowned with concern. He said the county market was very far from the village, and he had always been a farmer who spent his life around the fields, never experienced in taking goods to such a crowded place to sell. Manny looked at him with encouragement in her eyes. Her voice was gentle, yet it carried a strength that could not be shaken. She said that anything done for the first time would always bring early difficulties and unfamiliarity. But if they chose to sit silently in the village and endure, allowing rumors to drown their reputation, their family would never have a second chance to rise again. He looked deeply into his wife's determined eyes for a while longer, then nodded decisively. The road from Guiyun village to the county market took half a day of difficult walking. To arrive in time for the market opening, the couple woke at the third watch, while the world was still wrapped in deep darkness. Little Chen Qing was still sleeping soundly, so they carefully entrusted her to a kind old neighbor to watch over. Chen Pinggan used his strong shoulders to carry 2 baskets filled with heavy clay jars of paste. Mani carried a bamboo basket full of the tools they needed. 2 figures walked quietly beside each other through the thick darkness and the morning mist that had not yet dispersed. Along the way, they did not speak much. They only gathered all their strength into each step forward. When they reached the bustling county market, they quickly found a small empty corner, spread out a woven mat, and arranged their goods. Manny had carefully brought several clean small ceramic bowls and a large jar of paste with the lid already opened, allowing the natural fragrance to drift freely around them. Whenever she saw someone passing through the market, she smiled brightly and politely invited them to stop and taste a little flavor from the countryside. At first, the county people were cautious, especially because some had vaguely heard the bad rumors lately. But the sweet and sincere fragrance of the fermented paste drifted through the air, making it difficult for people to resist. The first person brave enough to stop was a white-haired old woman carrying a basket of vegetables. Curious, she used a bamboo spoon to taste a small bit of paste. Immediately, her eyes lit up with surprise. She praised it again and eagerly asked the price to buy a jar at once. After the old vegetable seller broke the ice with her first purchase, the people around began crowding curiously around the couple's small stall. A man who had just bought fish, a maidservant shopping for an official household, and many other townspeople all pushed in. By noon, when the sun stood overhead, the 2 heavy baskets of clay jars Chen Pingan had carried were all bought clean by the crowd. Not even one small jar remained. On the road back to Guiyun village, Mani walked at her husband's side, her steps far lighter and freer than they had been in the early morning. Chen Pingan looked straight at the road ahead and thought silently for a long while before slowly telling his wife that her calculation had truly been accurate. Mani did not act proud or smile triumphantly over the success. She only replied softly that their family had won, because the paste made by their own hands truly had honest quality and good flavor, and there was nothing in it that should shame their conscience. He suddenly paused in his steps and turned to look at the woman beside him. At that very moment, Mani also raised her eyes to look back at him. Their gazes met, filled with joy, beneath the sunset glow that dyed the peaceful sky of their homeland golden pink. Then, both shyly turned away and continued walking home. From that moment on, moved by some invisible force, Chen Pingan quietly shortened the distance between them and walked a little closer beside her than he had that morning. Summer came quickly to Guiyun village. The green rice fields stretching beyond the edge of the village were full of vibrant life. Thanks to the resounding success at the county market, the reputation of the Chen family's jarred soybeans paste spread rapidly across the surrounding region. The familiar customers who came to buy from within the village became stable and numerous, and no one cared anymore about the false rumors from before. The life of the family of 3 began to grow much better and easier. The money they had saved was enough for Mani to go to the market and buy several lengths of good cloth, which she cut and sewed by hand into clean new clothes for Chen Qing before the rainy season arrived. The relationship between Chen Qing and Mani no longer carried the cold distance of the first days after Mani entered the Chen household. The adorable child had completely abandoned the unfamiliar words, "that person." She began to call her Miss Mani. Although that form of address still carried a slight politeness and distance, deep inside it there was no longer the old rejection or dislike. Every morning after waking, the child would voluntarily bring a little stool and sit quietly beside her, helping with small chores, such as picking vegetables and washing dishes. Sometimes she would secretly run into the courtyard to chase the noisy chickens away from Mani's jars of paste. Yet the little girl always deliberately wore an indifferent expression, as if she did not care about any of it. Mani saw all these lovable changes in her daughter and felt warmth in her heart. She only smiled gently and never teased the child lest she make her embarrassed. One afternoon, the sky was high and blue without a single cloud. The children of Guiyun village had gathered noisily on the open ground at the village entrance to play a game of throwing grass balls. Chen Qing was so delighted that she asked her father and Mani for permission to join them. The game was going well when, from nowhere, an older child suddenly brought up a topic. Pointing straight at Chen Qing's face, the child loudly told the others that the adults said Chen Qing's birth mother had died long ago, and the woman in her house now was only a scheming stepmother. The older child continued casually, as if telling ordinary gossip, saying that no stepmother truly loved her husband's child. That woman was only pretending. Later, when she had children of her own, she would surely turn to dislike and neglect Chen Qing, leaving her a pitiful child with no real mother in the world. The younger children around them heard this and echoed along, giggling mockingly. Chen Qing stood frozen in the circle of children. Her small, pretty face turned pale with shock and deep hurt. The poor child bit her lip almost hard enough to draw blood, trying to stop herself from crying. In truth, the words spoken by those children did not come from any deep hatred. They were only repeating, like parrots, the words they had overheard from adults at home. Yet each careless word fell into the ears of a child who had lost her mother early like a sharp thorn stabbing into her sensitive heart. Chen Qing tried to endure, tried to hold back the grievance rising in her chest, but tears of hurt still poured down. At last she turned and ran desperately home, leaving behind the children's teasing laughter. At that moment, Xiamani was carrying a bamboo basket full of fresh vegetables she had just picked by the river. From far away, she saw the familiar small figure of her daughter running toward her as if fleeing for her life. Chen Qing was crying as she ran, her face red and wet with tears. Mani called the child's name in alarm. As though finding support at last, Chengqing crashed straight into her arms, her little hands gripping the coarse fabric of Manny's dress as she sobbed aloud, so heartbroken she could not speak in complete words. Manny quickly put the basket of vegetables on the ground and bent down to hold the trembling child tightly. One gentle hand kept patting the child's thin back as she softly asked what had happened to hurt her so badly. Chengqing refused to answer. She only kept shaking her head, burying her tear-soaked face deep into Manny's warm chest, her small shoulders shaking with every choked sob. Just then, the children who had chased after her arrived. One of them carelessly defended the group, saying that they had only spoken the truth, that Chengqing had no mother to love her. So what had they done wrong? Seeing her daughter's painful tears and the children's heartless attitude, Manny's usually gentle eyes instantly became cold and stern in a frightening way. She stood straight, one arm still holding Chengqing's shoulder and keeping the child protected in her embrace. Her strict gaze swept across each child before her. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear and firm. She asked who had given them the right to stand there and spread the claim that Qing was a child without anyone to love or care for her. The children saw her anger and fell silent with fear. Not one of them dared make another sound. Manny looked at them and continued to teach them in a restrained manner. She did not curse or shout rudely. She only made them understand that words they considered harmless jokes could carry great power to wound and could leave pain in another person's heart for a very long time. She stated firmly that Qing's father loved her deeply and that Manny herself also loved this child with all her heart. Therefore, she demanded that from now on, they must never again speak such malicious and cruel words. After saying this, she bent down, gently wiped away the tears still clinging to Chengqing's flushed cheeks with her handkerchief, and softly coaxed the child to go home with her. All the way back to the small thatched cottage, Chengqing did not say a single word, but her little hand actively held Manny's roughened hand very tightly. This was completely different from the hesitation and avoidance of several months earlier, when the child always tried to pull her hand away whenever Manny wanted to lead her out to play. The child's small hand gripped hers with extraordinary firmness, as if she feared that if she loosened her hold for even 1 second, she would immediately lose the precious warmth she had finally found with such difficulty. That evening, after listening to Manny tell the whole story of what had happened in the afternoon, Chen Pinggan's face turned pale with anger and heartache for his daughter. The man who held up the family sat silently in a corner by the dinner table, unable to eat much. Manny understood the torment in her husband's heart, so she did not press him with questions or blame him. She only quietly used her chopsticks to place better pieces of food into his bowl as encouragement. The family's dinner passed in a quiet, heavy atmosphere. After the meal, Manny took the initiative to boil a pot of warm water and wash Chengqing clean. Then she gently told the child to sit on the little wooden stool, while she carefully combed her soft hair with a wooden comb. This time the 6-year-old child was extremely obedient. She sat still and let Manny's gentle fingers care for her hair, without any attempt to avoid or resist as she had before. Late that night, the space around them was silent. Chengqing lay tucked in the warm quilt, but her eyes remained open and restless. Unable to fall asleep, Manny sat beside the edge of the bed, using the dim oil lamp light to sew clothes. Seeing the little girl turn about uneasily, she leaned down and softly asked whether the child wanted to hear a bedtime fairy tale. The room fell quiet for a long while. Then a tiny timid voice rose, full of choking grief. The child whispered that she missed her late mother very much. The needle and thread in Manny's hand stopped in mid-air. Chengqing held the old pillow tightly in both arms, tears of grievance silently streaming down her cheeks. She sobbed as she recalled that in the past, whenever she was frightened or had nightmares, her birth mother would gently hold her close, sleep beside her, and tell her wonderful stories. Then the child broke into sobs and said, "But now mother has gone far away forever. She is no longer beside me to protect me." Manny quietly set the unfinished garment on the wooden table. She did not rush to offer empty advice or hollow comfort to brush away the child's feelings. Instead, she gently opened her warm arms and pulled the small body fully into her embrace. Her soft hand stroked the child's hair, letting her cry freely and release all the sorrow and pain she had suppressed deep in her heart for so long. After a long while, the child's choked sobs gradually softened and stopped. Exhausted from crying, Chengqing obediently rested her chin against Manny's warm chest and enjoyed the peace. The familiar warmth and sacred motherly love from the woman beside her made the child's eyelids slowly close. Just when Manny thought her daughter had fallen completely asleep, a very small sound suddenly rose in the silence. It was as light and soft as a night breeze drifting past the porch. It was a childish, innocent word, the sacred word she had waited for all this time: mother. The hand Manny had been using to stroke the child's hair trembled slightly with overwhelming surprise. She lowered her head and looked at her daughter's round, sleeping face. Her eyes reddened at once, filling with tears of happiness. She gently pulled the cotton quilt up to cover the child carefully, then answered in a voice as tender and soft as the moonlight outside the window. She promised, "Mother is right here. From now on and forever, Mother will always be beside you to love you and protect you." In the outer room, Chen Pinggan was sitting quietly in a corner under the oil lamp, shaving bamboo strips. He had heard everything: his daughter's sacred call of mother, and Manny's warm, forgiving answer from the inner room. The rough hands of the man suddenly stopped. The sharp bamboo knife froze above the strip. He sat motionless, like a stone statue, for a long time in the darkness of the outer room. As a father, he understood better than anyone how important that sacred call was in his daughter's life. He also understood that it said something great about the character and generous heart of the woman in the inner room. His first wife, Liu Ni, had been gone for 3 years. He had thought his daughter's wounded heart would find it hard to open to another woman. But Manny had done that miraculous thing. She had not tried to force herself into Liu Ni's place. She had won the child over with sincerity, patience, and boundless love, day after day and month after month under the same roof. He slowly set the bamboo knife on the ground, leaned his head against the old mud wall, and looked up at the dark thatched roof. Deep in the heart of this rough man, he felt something warm quietly shifting. It moved slowly but firmly, like frozen winter soil beginning to stir as it welcomed the first warm sunlight of spring. The hot summer gradually passed with time. The glutinous rice fields of Guiyun village began to ripen. Golden ears of grain bowed proudly toward the earth. Whenever a gentle autumn breeze passed, the whole field rippled like waves of gold, stretching all the way to the misty mountains in the distance. Thanks to persistence and excellent quality, the Chen family's jarred soybean paste had now built a firm place in the hearts of people throughout the region. After that county market trip, orders came to the house more steadily and in greater numbers each day. The couple no longer had to worry constantly about being pressed down by bad people or dealing with malicious, false rumors. But for a hard-working woman with a keen mind like Manny, she did not want to stop at this first success. One evening, after the whole family had finished a warm dinner, she called softly, "Pinggan," in the familiar, gentle voice she had begun using after their successful trip to the county market. In that call, the shyness of her first days as a new wife had completely disappeared. She slowly told her husband that she wanted to try making sweet, glutinous rice wine to sell for additional income. She analyzed that this year's glutinous rice harvest had been very good. Each grain was plump and full. Before he passed away, her maternal grandfather had also taught her the traditional secrets of fermenting rice wine. If the first batch succeeded, the profit from selling good wine jars would be much higher than merely selling unprocessed glutinous rice to traders. Moreover, it would give the couple extra work and income during the coming slack farming months. Chen Pinggan carefully looked at his wife's face, bright with enthusiasm. In his weathered eyes, the cautious probing of their first days together had completely vanished. He had personally witnessed her skill in making delicious jars of paste. He had seen her tactful yet firm response when facing the dishonest trader Chu Mao, and her steady generosity in raising his daughter. Therefore, deep in his heart, he trusted her completely. This trust was not blind. It had been built from the real actions he had seen over time. He nodded and told her in a low voice that she should try. Hearing her husband's encouragement, Manny's eyes suddenly shone like stars in the night sky. The next day, the couple began building a small wine-making stove on the empty ground behind the house. Chen Pinggan took on the heavy work, such as cutting old bamboo to make a stove frame and carrying baskets of clay to build a sturdy stove base. Manny scrubbed the large clay jars clean, prepared the traditional wine starter, and dried the glutinous rice under the sun to deepen its fragrance. For several days in a row, their busy figures worked closely together without a moment of rest. One blazing noon, they carried heavy clay jars from the storehouse to the courtyard. Manny did not hesitate to roll up her sleeves and work. When Chen Pinggan saw his slender wife using all her strength to lift an oversized jar, he immediately stepped over. Without any polite words, he silently placed his large rough hands beside her small hands and helped her lift the jar. She raised her head in surprise and looked at his angular face, but he deliberately avoided her gaze and stared only at the clay jar before him. Together, they smoothly placed the jar exactly where it needed to go. She looked up at him and softly thanked him for helping. He only made a brief sound in his throat, as was his habit, and quickly turned away. Yet if one looked closely, both ears of that rough man had quietly turned red. Chen Qing, playing in the corner of the courtyard, happened to see her father's adorable awkwardness. The child hugged her grass ball and covered her mouth, giggling happily, though she herself did not fully understand why she was laughing. The work continued step by step. Manny steamed the glutinous rice into fragrant trays of cooked rice and carefully ground the wine starter into fine powder. Every evening after little Chen Qing had fallen soundly asleep, husband and wife sat beside the stove behind the house to tend the fire for the rice wine. Somehow, this became a natural habit between them, without either needing to arrange it. He would go out first to light the fire, and she would quietly brew a pot of warm tea and bring it out. Then the two of them would sit close together under a night sky filled with bright stars. One night, a sudden strong wind swept into the village and nearly blew out the fire in the wine stove. Mani, alarmed, rushed forward to use a reed screen to block the wind, but thick smoke blew straight into her face and made her choke and cough repeatedly. Seeing that his wife was in danger, Chen Pinggan immediately stepped over. With one strong hand, he decisively pulled her slender body back from the blazing stove mouth. With the other, he quickly seized a large woven fan and shielded the flame from the wind. Mani held her chest and coughed dryly while trying to reassure him that she was fine. Chen Ping lowered his head and looked down at her. His weathered eyes could not hide his deep worry and heartache. His voice was not loud, but it carried a more serious tone than usual, as he reminded her that whatever she did from now on, she must be careful and protect her body. When Manny's coughing stopped, she lifted her shining eyes and looked at her husband's face in the flickering firelight. This was the first time since their wedding that she had seen him show such sincere concern for her. It was not the probing look of their first days, nor the cautious observation of the weeks that followed. It was a truly genuine feeling that pulled the distance between two hearts closer. For a moment, her heart missed a beat, and she did not know what words to use for that warmth. Chen Pinggan, after realizing that he had been looking at his wife with an expression far too earnest, grew embarrassed and quickly looked away. Clearing his throat, he asked whether she could handle things now, or whether he should sit there and watch the stove for her. She softly told him to stay and help tend the fire. Her voice remained normal, but the corners of her delicate lips curved into a hidden, happy smile. During the following nights of tending the rice wine fire, the atmosphere between husband and wife gradually became much more open and warm. They began to talk and confide in each other more than before. The stories they shared no longer revolved only around calculations for paste and wine or the ordinary chores of daily life. They became private memories and deep feelings that neither had ever revealed to anyone else. Chen Pinggan slowly told her about the hard years after his first wife died, when he raised his child alone as a widowed father. He told her about the fateful night when Chen Qing had a high fever and convulsions, and he, panicked, carried the little child in his arms and ran all the way to the neighboring village to find a doctor. That night, rain poured down in sheets. In his panic, he did not even have time to bring a straw raincoat to cover himself. He only used every bit of strength to run desperately, afraid of losing his child. His voice was calm and plain as he told it. Yet as Manny listened, she deeply felt the mental burden and hidden loneliness of a man who had grown used to carrying all of life's storms alone. She looked at him with pity and softly comforted him, saying that Chen Qing was truly fortunate to have such a great father. Chen Pinggan did not answer at once. His eyes stared at the red glow of the fire. After a while, he said in a low voice that the greatest fortune for him and his daughter was that Mani had entered this family as his wife and Qing's mother. His voice was very soft and warm, as if he were only whispering to himself. Manny did not reply. She only quietly tilted the teapot and poured more warm tea into his earthen cup. The autumn night slowly passed in the pleasant crackle of burning wood and the chirping of insects outside the empty courtyard. From that fateful night onward, something between their two hearts quietly changed. The change was tiny and slow, like a spring seedling silently gathering nourishment before pushing through barren soil. Though no one could yet see its shape clearly, everyone could feel the warmth and happiness it spread. A few days later, the most anticipated moment arrived. The first batch of sweet rice wine was ready to be opened and checked. All three family members gathered around the large clay jar. Even Chen Qing was so nervous that she held her breath, her round eyes fixed on every movement her mother made. Manny took a deep breath to steady herself. With skilled hands, she slowly removed the covering cloth and opened the jar. A cool, sweet fragrance immediately rose from the jar and filled the room. It was the perfect blend of the rich aroma of freshly steamed glutinous rice and the distinctive sweetness of the wine starter. The batch was flawless, without the slightest sign of spoilage. Manny was overjoyed, her eyes curving into adorable crescent moons. Chen Qing jumped with delight and loudly cheered that her mother was truly the most capable person in the world. The child's clear laughter rang through every corner of the courtyard. Chen Pinggan stood quietly beside them and watched the larger and smaller figures rejoice together. Without realizing it, a bright smile curved his weathered lips. He gazed at Manny's face, at the way she happily bent to hug Chen Qing tightly, at how her eyes shone with true joy from the bottom of her heart, without the slightest pretense. In that moment, deep in the heart of this rough man, the warm feeling that had shifted silently over so many days and months suddenly became clearer and more vivid than ever. He finally understood what that sacred feeling was. It was only that a clumsy man like him still did not know how to express it or what to do with it. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. More than a year had passed since Xiamani married into the Chen family. That year, heaven did not favor the people. Disaster struck the poor countryside again and again. A drought lasted for months, leaving the earth cracked. Then came repeated storms and floods, ruining the rice and corn harvests of many families in Guiyun village and causing complete loss in the fields. The whole poor village fell into an extremely hard winter. People everywhere hurried from one end of the village to the other, trying to secure each day's meals. Worry and deep sorrow were written on every face. Fortunately, the small Chen household had jars of fragrant soybean paste, prepared carefully by the couple from the start of the season, jars of sweet glutinous rice wine stored in the kitchen corner, and a year-round green vegetable garden carefully tended by Manny herself. The family of 3 had enough food and warm clothing to pass through the freezing winter without once fearing hunger. Manny not only managed her own family's life well, she also had a deeply kind heart. In the coldest days of midwinter, when the chill pierced the bone, she personally went into the kitchen and cooked a large pot of steaming, fragrant porridge. Then she gently asked Chen Pinggan to carry it to elderly people living alone and families in especially difficult circumstances in the village, offering them something warm to eat. He looked at his wife for a long while with deep respect, then quietly carried the hot porridge away according to her words, without needing to ask anything more. When he returned home, several grateful neighbors had followed him to the door to offer sincere thanks. Tears of emotion still shimmered in their cloudy eyes. That evening, after the day's work had been finished, Chen Pinggan sat absent-mindedly on the long bench outside the house, his eyes fixed on the cold darkness before him. As naturally as a habit, Manny brewed a pot of warm tea, brought it out, and sat gently beside her husband. The two of them remained silent together for a long time, listening to the winter wind rustle through the bamboo. Then suddenly he spoke slowly in a low voice. He told his wife that since the day she had entered this home and taken on the family with him, he had truly realized how many precious feelings had been missing from the home he and his daughter had once lived in. Manny turned to look at her husband's angular profile. She remained understandingly silent and did not rush to interrupt him. Chen Pinggan continued to open his heart. The rough man's voice sounded somewhat hesitant and not very smooth, even though he was trying his best to express himself. He said that he had always been a crude person, not skilled at speaking beautiful words or sweet feelings. Yet he was certain that every effort and every good thing she had quietly done to care for this family, his heart had seen and remembered clearly. He lowered his head and looked at the warm teacup held in his calloused hands. Moved, he said that even little Chen Qing could feel all of it, and that the child was truly blessed to have Manny by her side caring for her. Hearing her husband say this, Manny's eyes trembled slightly. In a small voice, she told him that the child had willingly opened her heart and called her by the sacred word mother. Her tone was calm and gentle, yet deep inside it held an incredibly warm and sacred feeling. For a woman whose life had carried so much hardship, she said softly, receiving that much trust and love from the child already made her feel fulfilled and complete. When Chen Pinggan heard this, he suddenly lifted his head and looked straight into her clear eyes. This time, the rough man no longer chose to avoid her gaze or look elsewhere to hide his awkwardness as he had before. He looked at her with deep tenderness and steadiness, then said in a low voice that for her heart, perhaps that was enough. But for him, it was still far from enough. Mani froze at the meaningful words, her heart beating quickly with surprise. After speaking, he stood up and strode into the dark inner room. A short while later, he returned to the porch. In his rough, wind-weathered, calloused palm, he carefully held a simple wooden hairpin. He had carved and polished it with a knife with great care. At the head of the pin, he had tried to carve a small wildflower. The lines were still clumsy and rough, but the care visible in every grain of wood proved that this was the heartfelt work of a man who had spent all year holding a hoe to break the soil, and had never once made delicate handcrafted ornaments, yet had secretly learned and worked painstakingly for a long time to complete it. Embarrassed, he placed the small wooden hairpin into her soft palm. His eyes deliberately looked away, not daring to look directly at his wife's face. In a low, awkward voice, he explained that he had used late nights while tending the rice wine fire to carve this hairpin by hand. He said the gift did not look very beautiful or luxurious, but it was truly sincere, made by his own hands for her. Mani lowered her head and silently looked at the plain wooden hairpin resting in her palm for a long time. Her heart shook deeply. She slowly raised her head, her eyes full of emotion as they met her husband's earnest gaze. Chen Ping'an was still trying hard to restrain his shyness, but both his ears had already turned visibly red under the flickering light of the oil lamp. For the first time since the fateful day she entered the Chen family, Xiaomani felt her nose sting and tears of happiness almost spill from her lashes. She softly praised the wooden hairpin, saying it was truly beautiful. Her voice trembled slightly with the emotion rising in her chest. She told him that this was the most wonderful and beautiful gift she had ever been blessed to receive in her entire life of misfortune. Hearing his wife praise it, Chen Ping'an finally gathered the courage to look directly at her face. Their gazes met, filled with deep affection that could no longer be hidden. That tender look made Mani shyly glance away to hide her flushing cheeks. Her hands gently tightened around the wooden hairpin, as if she wanted to engrave the image of this gift into her heart. The next morning, the warm sunlight of a new spring began to appear, shining down on the small dirt road home, shaded by fresh green bamboo. By late afternoon, the brilliant sunset dyed the sky above the peaceful countryside red. Little Chen Qing skipped ahead happily. One of her small hands held her father's hand tightly, while the other held her mother's hand just as tightly. The child hopped along innocently, then turned back with a bright smile like a blooming flower and shouted in her childish voice, echoing down the road, "Father, Mother, the three of us should hurry home together." Chen Ping'an and Xiaomani smiled at the same time and looked toward their lovely daughter's small figure. Then the couple's eyes met by chance for a brief moment. Neither spoke any ornate vow, yet both of them naturally wore smiles of complete happiness. Ahead of them, pale gray evening smoke drifted lazily from the small, ordinary three-room thatched cottage. The rough clay jars of soybean paste still stood neatly lined in the front courtyard, and the jars of sweet glutinous rice wine quietly continued to release their fragrance in the warm kitchen corner under the care of a gentle wife. From then on, the lives of these three people might never enjoy rank, wealth, silk, or luxury like others in the world. But one thing was certain, their life would always be full, complete, and warm. Because now, under that small thatched roof, all three members were truly present. Three people who had each endured hurt and loss had finally found a peaceful harbor and become a real family to one another.